Snow fell in soft, deliberate flakes, veiling Winterfell's courtyard in a hush that seemed older than the stones themselves. Jon Snow, newly returned from the fires of the long night, stood beneath the shadow of the broken tower and felt the world settling back into silence. Everything after the Battle of Winterfell was supposed to feel triumphant, an echoing cheer of living hearts. Instead, there was only the indistinct whisper of snow and the distant thrum of dragons' wings passing overhead like fading thunder. He let the cold seep into his lungs. It carried the scent of wood smoke, of melted tallow, of damp wool from the black cloaks of the Night's Watch brothers he had once commanded. But now those days felt like tales told to another man. Someone still burdened with bastardy. Someone who did not yet know the taste of dragon fire, or the burden of a king's blood. The small folk moved with reverent caution around him. A few risked glances at the great scarlet banner now flying from Winterfell's ramparts. The direwolf of House Stark quartered with the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. Black on red. A new device, hastily sewn, still stiff at the edges, trembling in the alpine wind. It frightened them. Jon saw it in their eyes. The North had not forgotten Mad Kings or Dragonflame. But neither had they forgotten the courage that had saved them on the field when the dead poured through the gate. "Your Grace," a voice murmured at his back. Jon turned. Maester Walken stood at the stair, parchment in hands mottled by ink and cold. "The Lady of Winterfell awaits you in the Godswood." Jon offered a curt nod. He left footprints in the blanket of snow as he strode across the yard, passing beneath a row of fresh-cut spears, still crusted with ice, gifts from Lord Glover's men who swore to defend the keep until their last breath. The very air crackled. In the distance, a low, guttural roar rolled over the battlements, Drogon greeting morning, or perhaps grieving another memory only dragons could name. A pair of direwolves watched him from the steps of the Great Hall. Ghost, white as hoarfrost, and Nymeria, taller, leaner, recently returned to Sansa's side with a silent, almost spectral pack at her back. Their golden eyes followed Jon without judgment. He brushed Ghost's muzzle in passing, felt the rough warmth beneath fur as white as the drift. Then he wandered into the grove of the old gods. The weirwood's face bled the same crimson it had for thousands of turning seasons, as though the tree itself mourned eternally. Beneath its red canopy, Sansa Stark stood alone. Snow caught in her auburn hair, crystals bright as embers. She wore no crown, only a woolen mantle of snowy white, trimmed with gray, fastened by a simple direwolf clasp. But in her stillness, chin lifted, eyes deep with calculation, she looked every inch a queen. Jon paused at the edge of the pond, boots crunching on frozen earth. Wordless seconds stretched between them, until at last she lifted her gaze. "You came," she said. "I always come when you call." She smiled, but it held a brittle edge. "Did you hear them at the gate? The lords from the Rills, the Barrowlands, the White Knife Valley. They have questions about dragons, about what it means to kneel to fire after we bled for ice." Jon stepped closer. "I have questions too." Wind stirred the crimson leaves above, shaking loose a handful that drifted like burning snow. Sansa watched them fall. "I stood beside you on the battlements. I saw the way Rhaegal hovered near the weirwood like a hound near its master's hearth. He knows your blood. But the North remembers, Jon. They will not yield to a dragon queen from the south. Not even if she bears your favor." His jaw tightened. "Daenerys saved us. Without her. Without you," Sansa interrupted, voice a winter blade slipping between armor plates. "She would never have ridden north. The people understand that. They see you, not her. When you bend the knee, they think it is ice breaking under flame. But truly, it is your honor they follow." "Bendawan." Jon's breath clouded between them. "She is my queen. She is your aunt," Sansa corrected quietly. The truth rang hollow yet pure, echoing back from the carved face of the old god. Jon felt the familiar ache. Duty, love, loyalty, each tearing in a different direction. It changes nothing. It changes everything. Sansa whispered. The realm will learn of it soon. You cannot hold secrets like wildfire. They always find dry grass. She folded her arms. Words will spread. Houses will choose sides, as they always do. And this great war for life will become another war for thrones. And the North will be asked to die again, for a cause they did not choose. Jon stared at his reflection in the pool. Black leathers, stark furs, a battered sword at his hip. But behind his own shadow was another. Wings unfurled, scaled immense. Drogon circled overhead, turning the sky black for a heartbeat. Frost cracked. What would you have me do? Sansa took a step closer. Her voice softened into something almost tender. The North needs stability. The realm needs a just ruler. One with the blood of dragons, yes, but also the heart of a wolf. One who understands both fire and ice. Jon blinked. You speak of me. I speak of us, she answered. A pale light flickered across her features as a cloud peeled away from the sun. There was a time Starks married cousins to keep the blood strong. Our parents were cousins. Arya found records in the crypts. Uncle Brandon once sought a match between houses Karstark and Stark to ensure loyalty. The old gods will not frown on kin. None. The earth seemed to tilt. You would marry me? I would marry the king in the North. She replied. Not because the songs demand it, but because the people do. Join our names, put the direwolf beside the dragon in truth, and no southern queen or scheming lord can break what we forge. Jon's heart pounded like a war drum. Memories of Sansa as a child flitted through his mind. Her laughter in the courtyard. Her singing to the doll she cherished. But the child was gone. Before him stood a woman carved of northern stone, tempered in the fires of King's Landing's cruelty. He searched her eyes for warmth and found iron will instead. Sansa. He tasted the snow on his lips, icy, real. This is a marriage of state. It can be more. She murmured. She reached for his hand. Her fingers were cold, yet steadied his racing blood. We are not strangers. We shared a cradle. Shared a childhood. We have faced horrors side by side. I trust you more than any man alive. And you, trust me enough to leave the North in my care while you rescued the world. Men so. The weirwood's face watched them, expression unchanged for eternity, yet somehow attentive. Jon felt a chill full of reverence run down his spine. All those years he prayed here, seeking fatherly guidance from carved eyes. Now the answer stared back in the shape of a woman with flame-red hair. What of Daenerys, he asked. Sansa's voice did not waver. She will not share a crown. But she does not yet see the realm as it is. Fractured, weary, fearful of southern rule. If you take her south as your queen beside you, rebellion will rise. If you return as a Stark king with dragons, your dragons, loyalty will follow. Because they will see a northern king who bent none of his people's knees, yet still commands dragon fire. Men? Jon closed his eyes. Above, Drogon's cry cut through the cold, echoed by the distant, softer call of Rhaegal, perched along Winterfell's outer wall. He felt the weight of ancestry on his shoulders. Lyanna's love, Rhaegar's passion, Ned's silent honor. Duty pushed him forward even as desire dragged him back. When his eyes opened, he beheld Sansa. Proud, resolute, yet uncertain in the flicker of winter sunlight. He stepped closer until their breath merged in the frigid air. If we do this, he said, we do it for the North. For every child yet to freeze in winter. For every mother who buried her sons beneath these snows. We do it for them, not for power. For them, she agreed. Ghost paced forward, sniffing Sansa's gloved hand before resting his head against her skirts. Nymeria glided from the shadows, accepting Jon's tentative touch. 2 direwolves, 2 dragons overhead. Symbols drawn by fate. The weirwood leaves rustled, and somewhere a raven croaked, as if approving vows not yet spoken. 7 days later, torches flared along Winterfell's high walls, carving amber corridors through the night. Lords and ladies braved the bitter cold, their breaths rising like spirits. The great hall had been cleared of trestle tables. Long benches ringed the perimeter where northern warriors sat shoulder to shoulder. The central space was left bare, save for a woven carpet of black, felt embroidered with a direwolf and three-headed dragon entwined. Jon stood at the threshold in simple black doublet trimmed in gray wolf fur, Longclaw at his hip. He noted every banner above. The Mormont she-bear, the Umber's roaring giant, the Risewell horse, even the Glover pine. Most had come, though faces were divided. Some tight with hope, some clouded with suspicion. He saw Lady Lyanna Mormont watch him with solemn approval. Lord Glover pressed lips into a line. Lord Cerwyn whispered to his son. But they were here. That mattered. At the far side of the hall, beneath carved direwolves snarling from stone pillars, Sansa awaited. She wore a gown of silver-gray velvet sprinkled with tiny pearls like frost on leafless hedges. A mantle of direwolf fur draped her shoulders. Around her waist lay a belt of blackened iron wrought into interlocking direwolf heads, forged in the fires they used to melt down broken swords of their enemies. Her hair, once kept in elaborate southern twists, now flowed in loose waves, bound only by a slender circlet of ironwood and moonstone. Calm resolve brightened her blue eyes. Between them, Bran Stark sat in his carved wheeled chair, the growth rings of the weirwood seat visible beneath layers of polish. He served as the heart of the ceremony. The last greenseer in the north, prophet and judge. The firelight danced in his distant gaze. Arya stood behind him, sword at her belt, eyes sharp as a snow-lashed hawk. She offered a brief nod to Jon that spoke of deserts traversed, faceless gods appeased, and a sister's protected path. The hall hush fell thick. Jon crossed the floor, boots ringing on flagstones. At each step he felt centuries of Stark history pressing in, kings of winter whose ghosts lined the crypts below. Watching, weighing. He stopped before Bran. Sansa moved forward until they faced each other inside a circle of pools of shadow cast by the torches. Bran's voice carried, though it was barely more than a breath. You stand beneath the roof of your fathers. Do you come as kin by blood, or kin by vow? Kin by vow, they answered together. Why do you join hearts tonight? To guard our people, Sansa said. To bind North and Dragon, Jon added. Bran's pale eyes flickered, perhaps seeing far beyond the torch's glow. Then lay your hands upon the edge of steel, that those who came before may witness. Arya stepped forward, holding a dagger forged of Valyrian steel. Catspaw, blade glinting a dark rainbow in the firelight. She offered the hilt to Jon, who placed his palm against the flat. Sansa did the same, skin warm against the cold sheen. Together, they lifted. The room held its breath. Bran spoke. Old gods whose roots drink the memories of men, witness now the union of fire and frost. Let dragon's flame be tempered by wolf's mercy. Let winter's steel be warmed by summer's faith. In the bounds of hearth and hall, let these two be one. And the dagger's edge pricked both palms. Twin beads of blood welled, mingled upon the steel, dark as rubies. Wind outside howled across the battlements, rattling shutters. Flame guttered. A hush deeper than silence seemed to pulse through the hall, as though Winterfell itself exhaled. Jon and Sansa clasped bloodied hands, their bindings sealed not by Septon's words or Maester's quill, but by the old god's witness, the children of the forest's silent choir, and whatever unseen powers slumbered in the heart of dragonkind. Sansa did not flinch at the sting. Jon felt only a thrum of something ancient, half song, half roar, running from his heart to hers. When they released, Arya produced a strip of direwolf hide, wrapping it around their joined wrists, before tying a simple knot. Tradition, older than recorded annals. The tying of hands, to be cut only upon consummation or death. Bran nodded, faint smile ghosting. It is done. All here are witness. A low murmur rose among the lords, like thunder grumbling across hills. Some faces glowed with cautious happiness. Others remained stone. But the vow could not be undone without rending the fabric of northern law. The house banners lifted in a rising draft as though acknowledging a new wind. Jon looked into Sansa's eyes, found there a spark both familiar and new. Shared grief, mutual respect, and something waiting to awaken. He leaned forward, pressed his brow to hers. Heat flared. He smelled resinous pine, candle wax, snow-wet silk. Somewhere outside, dragons screamed. A piercing, resonant duet, Drogon and Rhaegal, answering the blood oath forged within these walls of frost. Dawn crept pale above Winterfell's towers. Jon stood on the battlement overlooking the training yard, cloak snapping behind him. Far below, unsullied drilled in flawless ranks, the clatter of spears metronomic. Grey Worm led them, face inscrutable. Beyond the east wall, tents of the northern levies crowded fields now glazed with frost. Blacksmith fires belched smoke, plowshares beaten back into swords as rumors damned or praised the marriage sealed last night. Jon's new wife climbed the stairs, her steps sure despite the fatigue hovering beneath her eyes. She settled beside him, arms draped over the stone merlon. They're saying she'll fly north by nightfall, Sansa murmured. Daenerys? A raven from Queenstown. Drogon spotted above the bight yesterday. She marches the remaining Dothraki and what's left of her fleet to White Harbor. Jon's stomach coiled. She moves quickly. She will want answers. She will not accept them easily. Sansa's breath steamed. Be honest. She deserves that much. He nodded. The wind made his eyes water. Below, Arya sparred two young soldiers with ease, laughing when one lost footing. Life continued despite politics and prophecy. She deserves the truth, Jon said. But she may not forgive it. Sansa adjusted her fur collar against the chill. That is the risk you chose the moment you told her your name. He considered, hands clasped tight on the rough stone. I never wanted crowns. I know, she replied gently. That is why they follow you. She traced a finger across the parapet, brushing snow aside, to reveal a notch in the stone. Maybe a dent from the Night King's spear, or the siege of Ramsay Bolton. You led men beyond the wall, brought wildlings south, slew the dead. You gave them reason to hope. Her eyes flicked to the clouded horizon. Now you must give them reason to believe tomorrow will not tear them apart. Jon followed her gaze. Far off, a dark shape curved across the sky. Wings beating slow and deep, vast shadow dwarfing clouds. Rhaegal. Scouting. He felt the tug within, a bond like an old wound that throbbed with each wing beat. The dragon banked southward, streaking toward the godswood, then soared upward into sunlight. I will speak with her, Jon promised. I will try to find peace. And if peace will not be found? Sansa asked. Jon's silence answered. The next evening, the courtyard sputtered with torchlight as wind tore through wall embrasures. Soldiers shouted as a host approached from the south. Unsullied lines parted, foreign banners rippled. Jon emerged from the keep as Drogon landed beyond the broken outer gate, sending men scrambling, snow vaporizing in a ripple of heat. Daenerys Targaryen dismounted, white cloak billowing, silver hair whipping about her face like live fire. Her violet eyes locked onto Jon. They held joy at first, relief, longing. But as her gaze slid to Sansa at Jon's side, to the matching blood-sealed bracelets still binding their wrists, joy shattered into incredulity. You married her, she breathed, each word a dagger tipped in frost. Jon stepped forward. Daenerys, your grace, Sansa interjected with a curtsy measured and remorseless. Winterfell bids you welcome. Daenerys ignored the greeting. She strode closer, boots crunching. Tell me it is a lie. Jon's throat felt raw. It is not. Fury flared in her eyes, but a deeper hurt eclipsed it. A wound beyond steel's reach. After all I sacrificed. You sacrificed everything, Jon agreed, voice thick. And you saved us all. The North will remember that. But the living will not follow you south. They fear southern rule, fear more war. They need a Stark upon the throne to heal. Then see. But you are not a Stark, she hissed. You are Aegon Targaryen. I am both, Jon said. And so is this kingdom we forge, Fire and ice, dragon and wolf. You seek the throne, she spat. He shook his head. I seek peace. Daenerys' breaths came fast. Drogon hissed behind her, sensing tension. The Unsullied leveled spears. Northern archers notched arrows. One spark could ignite slaughter. Sansa's voice slid through the turmoil like a surgeon's blade. Queen Daenerys, Winterfell offers you sanctuary. A seat at our council. Together we can rebuild what the Night King tried to destroy. There need be no war. Daenerys did not look away from Jon. Will you bend the knee to me, husband of your cousin? Jon stood unmoving. Snow gathered in his curls. I cannot. Silence exploded. Somewhere a horse whinnied. Flames snapped. Then Bran's wheeled chair creaked from the archway. Arya pushed him into the courtyard. The boy who had flown as ravens studied the queen with solemn expression. You would burn the kingdom to save it, Bran said softly to Daenerys. But fire consumes. Snow can smother flame. Nenderol. Daenerys' shoulders rose and fell. Snow betrayed me. Bran's gaze seemed to stretch centuries. All gifts bear a cost. Yours is mercy. A bitter laugh escaped Daenerys. She backed away, mounting Drogon in one fluid motion. The dragon launched, snow swirl churning into a cyclone. As wings hammered the air, Daenerys' voice broke across Winterfell. You have chosen your side, Jon Snow. Pray you never see mine. Black wings beat, vanishing into storm clouds seething over the Wolfswood. The days that followed passed in a blur of council meetings and war preparations. Winterfell rang with the clang of steel, the scrape of quills drafting oaths. Ravens took flight hourly bearing letters to White Harbor, to the Eyrie, to River Run. Some lords pledged swift, others hedged behind uncertain walls. Still others, House Serwyn among them, rode north to join under Jon's banner, hearts aflame with northern pride. Sansa deftly organized grain stores, reallocated timber, and pushed tailor guilds to produce thicker cloaks. She oversaw integrated patrols of Stark soldiers and Unsullied to ease tensions. She met with Dothraki Khalasars in the stable yards, negotiating rations and halting Valyrian, until a fragile respect took root. Through it all, she wore the blood-stained bracelet, never hiding the scar across her palm. Jon spent hours with Rhaegal, in the forest, clearing east of the Holdfast, acclimating the beast to northern winds. He flew at dawn, circling White Knife tributaries, letting villages witness the green dragon bearing a rider cloaked in wolf pelt, rather than southern silk. They cheered, some knelt, some hid. But word spread. The north had its own dragon now. Yet at night Jon would find himself outside Sansa's solar, hand raised to knock, hand falling away. He slept in the great bedchamber that once belonged to Ned and Catelyn, its vast emptiness echoing. Ghost curled at the hearth. Still Jon lay awake, listening to the winter wind, and imagined Daenerys' sorrow drifting beneath it, like smoke. On the 7th night after the marriage, a horn sounded on the ramparts. 2 short notes, 1 long. Jon threw on his cloak, hurried to the top of the east wall. A messenger pointed to the horizon. Orange pulsed against the clouds to the south, rhythmic as a heartbeat. Signal fires along the King's Road, drawing nearer. Within the hour, scouts returned with grave faces. Lord Jon Royce, bronze armor dented, dismounted in the yard. Queen Daenerys rides for Winterfell with 10,000 Unsullied, he reported. Herr Dothraki strike ahead, burning holdfasts that do not swear fealty. Lord Ryswell's keep at the rills is ash. Shock rippled through assembled captains. Sansa's jaw set stone hard. Jon felt ice creep into his veins. There would be no parley. A council convened deep into night. Lord Glover, Lady Mormont, Royce, Master Walken, Tyrion Lannister newly arrived from King's Landing, bearing burned parchments as evidence of Cersei's duplicity. The dwarf's gaze lingered on the married couple, equal parts admiration and regret. I underestimated her grief, Tyrion confessed, and her fear. She believes betrayal is but a stone's throw from every council chamber. She forgets we only live because of her mercy, Jon said. Mercy requires temperance. Sansa answered coldly. She traced the map spread before them. Little carved direwolves marking northern levies. Tiny dragon tokens marking Daenerys' forces. The Golden Company was crushed. Cersei's fleet burned. All that remains are her unsullied and Dothraki and Drogon. Jon leaned over the table, pointing to the bottleneck where the King's Road narrowed between two ridges thick with pine. We can hold here, dig wolf pits, fell trees across the road, force the unsullied to break formation. The Dothraki fear forest shadows. They will be vulnerable. And Drogon? Lord Glover demanded. Jon's reply was simple. Rhaegal and I will meet him. Tyrion's brows knit. Two dragons battling in the skies above a frozen forest could ignite half the north. Better ash than chains, Lyanna Mormont growled. Maester Walken dipped quill. If we are to fight, ravens must fly tonight. Sansa met Jon's eyes. Unspoken fear danced behind her steel facade. He placed a hand over hers. We fight for peace, he said softly. For peace. She echoed, barely audible. Winter's moon reached full, silvering every blade of grass. On the eve of battle, Jon visited the crypts. Lantern in hand, he walked past silent kings, past Lyanna's effigy. He knelt before Ned Stark's resting place. Words came halting. You taught me honor. I pray I still know its shape. He exhaled. I must fight her, father, the woman who saved us. I do not know if I can raise my sword. Stone remained mute. The lantern flickered. Footsteps approached. Sansa descended the stair wrapped in a sable cloak. She carried a sheathed blade slender as hope. This belonged to our mother, she said, offering it. The castle forge reforged the steel. Lighter, swifter. She called it calm. Mentandero. Jon took the sword, its grip leather smelling of pine pitch. Thank you. Sansa touched his arm. Return to me. He searched her eyes. The brittleness melted into something fragile, raw. He leaned forward, lips brushing her forehead. She closed her eyes, breathed him in. No knights, no thrones, only two souls lost in ancient darkness among stone kings. I will, he promised. Dawn bled red across the ridges of Wolf's Narrow. Forests smoldered, felled pines forming barricades. Snow had melted in patches from the heat of torches and dragon flame sweeps from practice runs. Northern spearmen lined the ditches, archers perched on half-buried bolted towers. The ground shook with hooves as Dothraki screeched beyond the distant tree line. Jon mounted Rhaegal in the clearing behind the ridge, the dragon's scales gleaming green gold. Armor newly forged for dragon riders hugged his shoulders, embossed with a direwolf overlaid by a small three-headed dragon. Nearby, Sansa sat astride a white courser, wearing a helm fashioned after Lady Lyanna's. She would command reserves and signal horns. She guided her horse closer. Remember, she called over wind-whipping banners. If Drogon falters, Daenerys may flee, capture, not kill if you can. Jon nodded. Their eyes locked. So much left unsaid. He nudged Rhaegal skyward. The dragon's wings churned frost and earth, launching them above the pines. As they soared, Jon felt the bond tighten, heartbeat sensing with slashing wings. Beyond the ridge an ocean of unsullied shields glimmered, ranks countless. At their head, gray-scaled Drogon rose like living night. Daenerys astride, silver hair wrath-tangled. She saw Jon, and flame licked from Drogon's teeth. Wind screamed as the dragons arrowed together, green fire meeting black. Jon drew breath, tasting ash and snow. Below, two armies collided, shields splintering, hooves pounding. Trees snapped beneath Dothraki arcs, northern arrows fell like sleet. But above all, two dragons spiraled. A ballet of death and destiny. Drogon roared first, column of fire spearing skyward. Rhaegal banked, flame washing uselessly against armored scales. Jon leaned into the turn, feeling ribs bruise against saddle. He guided Rhaegal to dive through Cloudbank, coming up beneath Drogon. He raised calm. Moonlit steel flashed. Drogon swerved, claws raking Rhaegal's flank. Blood sprayed in steaming arcs. Jon nearly pitched from the saddle. He clung, vision pulsing red. Rhaegal shrieked, tail whipping to catch Drogon's wing joint. Bone cracked. Daenerys shouted, unintelligible across howling winds. Tears streaked her cheeks, anger, grief. She pressed knee to Drogon's neck. The black dragon writhed, rolled, corkscrewing downward. Rhaegal followed. Below, the battle parted, men scattering as two titans crashed among pines, felling trunks like matchsticks. Snow and mud erupted in geysers. Jon leapt free as Rhaegal skidded across frozen earth. Drogon unfolded, towering, eyes burning coals. Daenerys slid from the saddle, feet touching ground as gracefully as a comet landing. She drew a curved Dothraki arak. Across the shattered clearing, Jon advanced, calm in hand. Snow fell again, gentle, ghost-like, as though the sky repented the fury unleashed. Daenerys' voice trembled. "Stand aside, Jon. I cannot." Her gaze flicked to the bracelet binding his wrist still. "You would kill me for her? I would die for peace." She lifted her blade. "Then today, one of us finds peace." The air between them felt brittle, ready to shatter under one wrong breath. Jon tightened his grip, stepping through snow matted with dragon blood. Overhead, Rhaegal forced himself upright. Wings mantled, but Drogon snarled a warning. Two sets of reptilian eyes glowed, mirroring their rider's pain. The first clash came swift, arak whistling, calm parrying. Sparks flew like shards of morning star. Daenerys spun with dancer's grace, years of training in alien sands evident. Jon answered with northern discipline, each stroke efficient, each block absorbing her fury. Around them the forest battle lulled as soldiers sensed the duel that held their fate. Wind ceased. Snowflakes hung suspended. Daenerys feinted left, arak sweeping low. Jon twisted, blade slicing her shoulder guard. Leather split. Crimson bloomed. Her growl was pure dragon. She grabbed a fallen spear, hurled it. Jon ducked, spear whistling past to slam into an oak. He advanced, disarming her arak with a riposte. She stumbled back. Calm's tip hovered at her throat. Behind her, Drogon reared, maw opening with building flame. Jon's eyes widened. He couldn't strike. To kill Daenerys would unleash Drogon's wrath unfettered. "Dany," he whispered through chapped lips. She searched his face. Plea, regret, love mingling in the storm of green eyes. Flame reflected in her tears. Her lips parted. A horn blared from the ridge. 3 rising notes. Sansa's signal. Jon risked a glance. Northern cavalry flanked the unsullied banners of white direwolves closing in. But more. From the distant sky streaked shapes. 3, 4. No. Wyverns carved of black iron, propelled by trebuchet? No. In that heartbeat Jon recognized them. Gaunt shapes, membranous wings, eyes blazing icy blue. The Night King was dead, yet the dead did not sleep. Spectral dragons, spawn of some lingering necromancy, dived at the field, trailing frostfire. Screams rang. Chaos eclipsed the mortal battle. Drogon shrieked at newcomers. Rhaegal lunged to intercept. Daenerys' gaze snapped upward. Horror, eclipsing rage. All grudges erased. She looked at Jon, eyes pleading for aid. Without hesitation, Jon lowered calm, extended his hand. "Together," he said. She took it. Above, a frost dragon collided with Rhaegal. Blue flames meeting green-dyed cholray. Snow vaporized. Jon and Daenerys mounted their wounded beasts, lifting into a sky suddenly full of apocalypse. Northern men and Unsullied alike watched as dragonkind clashed in a maelstrom of fire and ice. Ash and snow mixed in whirling columns. Below, Sansa ordered archers to loose flaming arrows tipped with wildfire, stolen from Cersei's stores. Plumes of emerald flame streaked upward. Jon felt Rhaegal's pain coursing through him, ribs aching, wing torn. Daenerys called instructions, voice ragged. Left flank, dive, burned RG. They fought as one, not husband and wife, not queen and usurper, but two last scions of Valyria, defenders of the living. With a roar that split the heavens, Drogon and Rhaegal locked jaws with the lead frost worm. Jon plunged calm into its translucent skull. Daenerys drove her Eric into its spine. Blue light burst, shattered like crystal. The creature fell, smashing through ranks of unsullied and northern men alike. But its death cry sent the remaining frost dragons into confusion. Drogon pursued, flaming pure molten fury. Rhaegal joined. Twin storms of red and green fire scoured the sky until the frost beasts dissolved into shards of rime, drifting down as glittering dust. When silence at last returned, Jon guided Rhaegal earthward. Drogon landed beside. Soldiers across the field dropped weapons, awestruck. Sansa galloped toward them, helm discarded, hair wild in wind. Daenerys dismounted first, leaning heavily. Jon followed, steadying her. Blood soaked her sleeve. His brow bled from a gash unknown until now. Sansa reined in, dismounting. She approached Daenerys, boots crunching frost. For a heartbeat, women's eyes met. One of ice, one of fire. Then Sansa extended a hand. Winterfell thanks its queen. Daenerys' shoulders sagged. She accepted the hand. Winterfell has its own queen. Jon stepped between them. Queens are many. The realm needs counsel, not crowns. The field lay strewn with dead, northern, unsullied, Dothraki. Frostworm shards melting into spectral mist. Overhead, dragons circled weary, but living. In that cold dawn, 3 rulers stood among ruin. Stark bride, Targaryen queen. Snow turned dragon wolf. Around them, soldiers knelt, not to banners, but to hope forged amid catastrophe. Jon sheathed calm. Let this be the last drop of blood spilled for a chair of swords. Sansa nodded. Daenerys' breathing steadied. Together, they faced the battered armies. The Iron Throne will be melted, Jon proclaimed, voice echoing across the clearing. In its place, we shall build a council of realms. North, Vale, Riverlands, Stormlands, Reach, Dorne, and Crownlands, each led by those chosen by their people. Murmurs rose, swelling to cheers. Tyrion emerged limping, smiling tiredly. Daenerys looked skyward where dragons wheeled. Dragonfire will forge anew, she murmured. Sansa clasped Jon's hand, binding bracelet glinting with mingled blood, half faded yet eternal. Snowflakes fell, gentle upon carnage, promising quiet. In that fragile hush, the foundations of a Stark dynasty were laid, born of marriage, tempered by dragonfire, mirrored in northern snow. And though the road ahead wound through ashes and ice, for one breath all 3 hearts beat in unison, forging a future no song had yet dared sing. Smoke drifted skyward in languid ribbons, trailing from funeral pyres scattered across the clearing, where battle had raged only hours before. Pine logs spat resin into the flames, sending sharp bursts of fragrance that mingled with the iron scent of blood and the musky undercurrent of dragon. Men and women of every banner knelt beside the dead, pressing hands to cold brows, whispering names into the hush that follows catastrophe. Jon Snow stood at the edge of the largest pyre, face streaked with soot, hair damp from melted frost. He lifted a torch offered by young Ned Umber and touched it to the kindling beneath a fallen Mormont shield-bearer. Dry twigs flared bright, then surrendered to slow, solemn burn. Light licked across Jon's worn features, revealing lines etched deeper by the weight of recent hours than by all the winters before. In the glow he felt the presence of ghosts, the 2 whose bodies lay entombed beneath stone wolves, the thousands who had marched into the long night, and the countless more who would never see the world reborn. Each name was a stone added to the cairn on his heart, but he bore them still, because he must. Across the pyre Sansa watched, gray cloak gathered tight against her throat, copper hair glowing like a banked ember. Mourning draped her shoulders, but steel threaded her posture. She murmured final words over the fallen of House Flint, cousins who had stood at the feast just nights ago, and then she too set her torch to the timber. Flames painted her eyes with amber sorrow. When she looked up to meet Jon's gaze, there was silent accord between them. Duty did not end with battle's roar. It seeped into the quiet, demanding shape be given to the torn world, before it dried and cracked apart. Daenerys Targaryen approached from the shadows, cloak of unbleached linen brushing the churned earth. Her right arm hung in a sling, the wound bandaged, but leaking faint crimson. She paused at the edge of the firelight and regarded the rows of pyres, northern, unsullied, Dothraki, men of the Vale, all joined in death, though they had been divided in life. Her expression shifted through grief, guilt, and fragile resolve. At her back lumbered Grey Worm, face unreadable behind the mask of unsullied discipline, though his eyes glinted wet in the gloom. Drogon and Rhaegal perched on crags beyond the tree line. Silent sentinels, tails coiled over broken pines like serpents, guarding hallowed ground. Periodically they loosed low keens, as though murmuring to each other about the strange new flavor of loss. Daenerys met Jon's eyes across the burning dead. No royal titles graced her lips, only his name. Jon. He answered in kind. Daenerys. The gap between them seemed both impossibly broad and dangerously thin. Like ice above rushing water. He gestured toward the wounded soldiers clustered near the field's edge. We'll need tented infirmaries tonight. The maesters say fever will strike with the next dusk. I brought casks of Myrish rubyfire with my train, she replied, and antivenom from Karth. We can share what remains. Jon inclined his head. Thank you. Words stuck thereafter, trapped beneath the press of memory. Her blade at his throat, calm's edge at hers, dragons colliding amid lightning. Yet beneath that tension lay an undercurrent stronger than recrimination. They had fought side by side against frost wraiths conjured from nightmares, and in that crucible found a slender thread of common cause. The world had turned, as it always did, and now their hands shaped its axis. For the moment, that must be enough. Sansa stepped forward with diplomat's poise. Grey Worm, your unsullied may shelter in the east yard by dawn. Stone sheds stand there, warm enough once fires are lit. She met his gaze. We can provide straw mats and boiled oats until proper stores arrive from White Harbor. Grey Worm's nod was shallow, but respect flickered in the tilt of his chin. We will accept the lady's generosity. From shadows behind the pyres Arya emerged, wiping charcoal from her cheeks. Wood's running low already. She observed in a voice strangely soft for one who bore so many sharp edges. We'll need to send carts west for deadfall by morning. Wolves drove the deer farther out. Nothing but crows left in the closer glades. I'll dispatch rangers, Jon said. Take Gendry and 24 of Lord Glover's bowmen. We cannot afford surprise. Arya smiled, quick as a knife slash. I'll bring you enough logs to warm Dragonstone. She promised, then melted back into the darkness before anyone could weave gratitude around her shoulders. The pyres crackled, sparks drifting upward to mingle with stars newly bared by passing clouds. Soon only the blaze spoke, pronouncing judgment on old hatreds. Jon turned to Daenerys, voice low. We must talk. Just the three of us. Before politics devours what's left of honor. She nodded. Sansa studied them both, then gestured toward the quiet ring of standing stones near the Godswood, where Bran often took solitary vigils. There, she suggested, far from prying ears. The air inside the stone ring felt older than the walls of Winterfell, as if some ancient pulse of power rose from roots beneath. Rime coated the monoliths, glittering under half-moon light. Bran waited in his chair at the center, eyes pale and unblinking, as though he had known all along they would come. Snow lay unbroken around him despite the bustle elsewhere, untouched by boots or wolves. He greeted them with a faint smile devoid of surprise. Jon kneeled to shift Bran's chair closer to the wide, flat altar stone. Daenerys sat upon it, exhaustion heavy in her shoulders. Sansa remained standing, arms folded, sentinel between factions that were no longer simply north and south, but fire and ice, past and future. For a long while none spoke, lulled by the subtle susurration of wind threading through the carved stones. At last Bran said. The song has changed. Daenerys tilted her head. What song do you mean? The one the world sings, Bran answered. Every heartbeat, every gust of wind, every dragon's roar. He looked at Jon. Every promise. It used to be a dirge. His gaze shifted to Daenerys. Now it is something new, uneasy, but new. Jon felt chill at the marrow. We did not kill each other. That is something. Nor did we surrender, Sansa added pointedly. Daenerys' mouth twitched with what might have been wry amusement. Compromise. A concept I seldom trusted until tonight. Bran turned his attention to her. Your destiny was never a straight road, Your Grace. It bent through shadow and flame, across seas of salt and death, to bring you here. The path ahead has many forks yet. Men now. Forks? Daenerys echoed. The throne you sought, Bran murmured, does not belong to you, nor to Jon, nor to any single soul born of flesh and bone. It belongs to the realm itself. Sansa raised an eyebrow. Which is precisely why we proposed a council. Bran nodded once. But first, you must tear down the remains of what was. Silence pressed them like weighty snow on a pitched roof, threatening collapse. Jon found his voice. The throne of blades must fall. Daenerys glanced at him. There is hardly a throne left in King's Landing. Cersei's wildfire ripped the foundations apart. But shards remain, Bran said. Iron, bronze, embered bones of dragons and men. Symbols hold power, even broken ones. They must be remade. Daenerys looked down at her bandaged arm. What would you see forged in its place? Bran closed his eyes. A moment later he spoke, each syllable laced with eerie certainty. A seat of living wood, grown from the weirwood's children. Green and white. Roots entwined with veins of dragon glass. A throne that remembers, and yet yields. None. Sansa breathed. A promise of balance. Jon thought of legends recited by old Nan at the hearth. Trees that whispered truths, glass shaped by the blood of frozen gods. His heart thumped like wings of some unseen bird. How? The children of the forest are gone. Not gone, Bran corrected softly. Sleeping. South and west, in the shadow of the Isle of Faces. Some remain. Daenerys stared at Bran with a mixture of wonder and skepticism. And you would have us cross half the realm to coax seedlings from myths. The world you saved is more myth than mortar, Bran said. Magic is awake again. Either we guide it into new channels, or it will flood us all. Jon rubbed a thumb over the scar across his palm. The wound from the wedding dagger had reopened during the battle, weeping onto Calm's hilt. We cannot leave the north undefended, and storms will close the neck soon. Ice on the roads by first moon of winter. Sansa unfolded her arms. We split our strength. I remain here to secure harvests, rebuild keeps, and soothe anxious bannermen. Jon travels south with Daenerys, to the Isle of Faces, if Bran wills it, then to King's Landing. 2 dragons will guard them. Rhaegal needs rest, but he can fly again in a fortnight. Now, Daenerys studied Sansa. You would trust me beside Jon? Sansa met her gaze unflinching. You saved him tonight. He saved you. I think the realm can trust that bond. Besides, and here a flicker of surprising warmth softened her tone, dragons do not obey me. They obey you. Man shall. Jon watched tension ease fractionally from Daenerys' shoulders. She inclined her head, concession wrapped in dignity. Very well. We fly south together for this living throne, Dynasty. Bran's lips curved barely. I shall go with you. Jon blinked. Bran, you cannot ride. I can fly. His eyes glazed white for a beat, too quick for the others to notice. But Jon saw the pupils vanish, replaced by milky frost. When they returned, Bran's voice held certainty. Even Kennel travels with the supply wagons. I'll work through them when needed. My body may remain here or ride by cart. It matters little. But Sansa knelt beside him. It matters to me. You are my brother. And your king, Bran reminded gently. In spirit, if not in style, I will go whichever road best serves the realm. But I must see what grows at the isle, and guide its roots to King's Landing." Jon nodded slow. "Then we depart soon. Rhaegal must mend. Give us 2 weeks." Daenerys rose from the stone, careful of her injury. "I will ready Drogon and gather the Unsullied who wish to follow. Those who remain will defend Winterfell." Grey Worm's voice drifted from the dark behind a standing stone. "Where my queen leads, I follow." He stepped into the meager moonlight, spear butt planted firm. "But some of my brothers wish peace. If the Lady Sansa permits, they will settle near White Harbor." Sansa inclined her head. "They will be welcomed, provided they keep the king's peace." She paused. "Or queen's." Daenerys offered a fragile smile. "Perhaps someday, there will be no need for such titles at all." Bran exhaled, mist pluming. "That day lies beyond the turning of many seasons. But you may light the first dawn." Then Derwandi. Preparations consumed 14 days, each dawn revealing new fractures in the post-battle tapestry. Reports of raiding bands of frost wraiths filtered from the east, where specters born of residual magic roamed woodlands in search of life warmth. Small folk fled farms once again, seeking safety behind Winterfell's walls, their faith wearing thin as drifts in April. Sansa dispatched Arya and a company of trackers to flush these phantoms and burn their icy sinews with dragon glass-tipped arrows. And for each night that Arya did not return, Sansa paced the ramparts like a restless direwolf. Jon oversaw Rhaegal's healing, applying poultices brewed from powdered dragonbone and pine resin at Maester Walken's instruction. Each morning he climbed scaffolding to the dragon's wounded flank, pressing salves into fissures, whispering reassurances in High Valyrian. Rhaegal's great eye, gold-green flecked with copper, regarded him quietly, accepting the sting without protest. Ghost lingered nearby, tail softly thumping snow, offering silent companionship to both rider and beast. Daenerys convened with unsullied captains and Dothraki coasts before dawn beneath tattered striped tents, salvaged from shattered khalasars. She spoke in low Valyrian, instructing them in the art of garrison rather than pillage, teaching them to dig palisades and reinforce stone walls. The Dothraki chafed, but her command held iron. They hammered stakes, muttering, yet obeyed. She visited wounded stable hands, cupped their cheeks in gratitude, and for each soldier who spat at her name, she answered with a bowl of hot broth and a promise of new horizons. Slowly suspicion cooled. Tyrion occupied a small chamber off the Great Hall, quills scratching from sunrise to moonset. He drafted charters for the Provisional Council, each clause refined with Sansa's input. Letters bearing wolf and lion together traveled by raven to Storm's End, High Garden and Sunspear, inviting lords and ladies to a great moot at King's Landing, come frostfall. "If the realm will not kneel," Tyrion remarked, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, "we shall teach it to stand." Brienne of Tarth arrived on the 13th day, bearing news from Riverrun. She bowed deep to Sansa, then sought out Jon near the Godswood. "The River Lords accept your marriage," she reported. They saw dragons overhead and decided the old arguments could wait. She smiled faintly at Rhaegal's distant roar. "Sir Podrick sends greetings from the Trident." Jon clasped her gauntleted hand. "Your honor remained unbent through all storms, Sir Brienne. It's good to see you in calm." "Then see you. Calm is relative," she said, glancing at Daenerys guiding Dothraki spear drills beyond the broken gate. "But I'll take hope when I find it." That night, Arya slipped through a postern door, cloak spattered with melted frost. She dropped 3 shattered ice wraps onto the council table. "Frost wraith hearts," she declared. They shrieked like gulls when they cracked. She accepted a mug of mulled wine from Davos Seaworth, winked, then collapsed onto a bench beside Gendry, exhaustion finally outweighing restless spirit. With the forest secure and dragons mending, the day of departure dawned clear and cold. Winterfell roused before sunlight, swaddled in hush. Sansa stood upon the battlements above the main gate, hair braided into coiled knots reminiscent of her mother's style. Jon felt the tug in his chest at the sight, familiar and foreign. Beneath the arch, the unsullied company stood ranked, spears upright, shields newly painted with a white direwolf prowling across black field. Dothraki riders encircled supply wagons, braids clattering with polished medallions hammered from melted horseshoes. Trophies not of war, but of survival. Rhaegal tested wings against the wind. Scars remained. Silvered scars across emerald membranes, but strength flowed through sinew once more. Drogon alighted beside, black wings eclipsing dawn. Bran's chair was secured atop a padded litter between two broad-backed palfreys, reins held by Podrick Payne. Bran's gaze roved the sky, perhaps seeing things none else could comprehend. Jon approached Sansa. Snowflakes gathered on the fur over her shoulders, though the sun had not yet risen. He removed one glove and cupped her cheek, thumb brushing pale freckle. "I will send ravens every 3 days," he assured. "And if storms cut them off, look for Drogon's fire over the neck. Will not be gone long. You'd better not." She whispered, voice tight. Ghost pressed his head against her thigh, sensing tension. She smiled down at the direwolf, then met Jon's gaze again. "Remember your promise. Capture, not kill, if blood runs high." "I remember." He hesitated, then leaned in to kiss her gently, the band binding their wrists shimmering in the torchlight. Sansa's breath caught. Then she returned the kiss with reserved fierceness. They parted, and Jon felt a warmth he carried as he turned toward the dragons. Daenerys waited at Drogon's shoulder, silver braids woven back in Kiskar style. She regarded Sansa upon the wall, then Jon approaching, and inclined her head, acknowledging a queen in all but crown. She climbed the scaled flank with practiced ease despite her healing arm. Jon mounted Rhaegal, gripping the high saddle horns. Tyrion and Davos exchanged worried glances near the gate. "May the gods, old or new, keep them," Davos muttered. "Better pray to the dragons," Tyrion replied. Horns sounded 3 clear notes. Farewell. Gates groaned open. Windswept snow billowed across the courtyard. With a resonant roar, Rhaegal launched, Drogon following an eye blink later. The great beasts climbed, wings stirring thunder over Winterfell's towers, over the heart tree whose red leaves shivered though there was no breeze. The column below began its march, hoofbeats muffled in white silence, unsullied spears glinting. Sansa watched until dragons diminished to dark specks. Only then did she turn to tasks awaiting. Harvest tallies. Smithy rosters. The delicate matter of seating a Dothraki emissary at the hearth where once Karstark lords drank mead. She exhaled fog and squared her shoulders. Winter was far from ended. South of the Twins, the King's Road lay rutted and thinned, its earlier migrations of refugees burned away by skirmishes between Queen's men and Crownland stragglers. Snow retreated beneath southern sun, replaced by slick mud that clung to wagon wheels like tar. Jon rode at column's head, cloak snapping, scanning hills for sign of bandits lured by vision of dragon-guarded treasure. But where the small folk spotted a dragon's shadow they fled, not attacked, and the road remained eerily vacant. At dusk on the 4th day, they camped beside the weirwood at Lord's Whisper, the ancient limbs stark against violet sky. Bran requested the company gather in the tree's shadow, and there he warged into a black raven with wings streaked white. The bird ascended, corkscrewing into dark. Minutes stretched to hours before it returned, settling on Bran's shoulder. Bran's eyes flared white, then normal. "The path ahead is clear tonight," he reported. "But the ruins of Maidenpool are restless. Fires bloom where no hearth stands." His voice gained brittle edge. "Necromancy lingers still." Daenerys suggested detour along the coast. Jon concurred, unwilling to risk the wounded. They altered course southeast, passing by Drearfin's salt marshes, where ghost lights danced above black pools. Dothraki riders muttered of Toralex. Spirits that steal voices. Unsullied patrols placed torches in concentric rings around camp, and Drogon circled overhead until moonset. Jon lay sleepless beneath canvas, Rhaegal's heartbeat thrumming through the earth. On the 8th morning, the moors opened into rolling hills of the Crownlands where charred remains of wheelhouses attested to Cersei's scorched earth retreat. Tyrion rode front alongside Jon, face taut. "It will be worse near the city," he warned, recalling whispers from merchants. Hunger, plague, rogue Lannister sellswords prowling the bay. "We must secure the grain stores at Rosby before someone else burns them." Daenerys overheard. She called up from her dappled mare, voice clipped. "Drogon and I will scout ahead at dawn. If smoke rises from Rosby's fields, we act immediately. There will be no more starvation games." "No." Tyrion inclined his head. "A far gentler queen than the realm remembers." Her answering smile was small, tinged with rue. A far wearier one. 2 days later, Rosby's tall granaries crowned a hill as brown sentinels against azure sky. Surprisingly intact. Farmers emerged from hedgerows warily until they saw dragons bank overhead. Then they prostrated in muddy furrows, while children giggled, unafraid. Daenerys landed Drogon at the green, fracturing cobbles, and pledged 20 unsullied to guard the stores. She decreed half of next harvest would travel north to feed those who faced deeper snow. The Rosby steward, rotund and shaking, signed Tyrion's parchment with trembling quill, still unconvinced he wasn't dreaming. A circle of ravens spiraled high that evening, carriers of news both dire and hopeful. One message bore Lady Olenna's seal, though the Tyrell matriarch lay long dead. Lords of the Reach convened at Bitterbridge under banner of a young Lady Redwine, pledging harvest surplus to Winterfell if safe passage for traders could be secured. Jon wrote swift reply. Reach caravans were welcome, provided they avoided the still-haunted ruins of the Gift. Another raven carried Dornish script. Prince Corraine of Sunspear proposed sending a delegation to the Moot with samples of wind-blown barley that thrived in desert storms. Perhaps the North could adopt the hardy grain. The world shifted, lines realigning like ice flows after thaw. Yet not all letters smiled. Reports from the Iron Islands described Euron's surviving reavers butchering villagers along the stony shore. Yara Greyjoy, having reclaimed Pike in her queen's name, requested permission to hunt her uncle's remnants. Jon granted it. Daenerys penned a note of blood-inked thanks. War might recede, but pockets of night remained. At last, after 15 days on the march, the battered towers of King's Landing loomed from the ridge. Broken spires jutted like charred fangs over the bay. The great sept's ruins still smoked faintly, though a full year had passed since its immolation. Streets beyond the city wall resembled open maws where wildfire blasts had chewed stone to black glass. Yet the gateway stood, albeit half crumbled, guarded by gaunt men in mismatched armor, bearing no sigil. Sellswords paid by what sparse coin remained in noble coffers. The sellswords trembled beneath dragon shadows. Jon rode forward, banner of wolf-dragon entwined upon his spear. "Open the gate," he commanded. The captain, a balding Essosi mercenary, stuttered a protest about tolls, then fell silent when Drogon settled upon the battlements and snarled. Gates creaked inward. The column entered to stunned silence. Small folk peered from shattered windows. Hollow-eyed but curious, children pointed at the direwolf standard, whispers rippling. Stark, stark. Dragons soared overhead, one black, one green, casting mottled shade across shattered cobbles. In the Red Keep, once resplendent, the Grand Tower leaned at precarious angle. Wild grapevines twined through its cracks, as if nature sought to stitch wounds men had rent. Jon dismounted in the outer ward. The place smelled of dust, salt, and something sour, like regret steeped in old wine. Daenerys walked beside him, eyes devouring the ghost of her childhood dreams. "My family's bones seeped these stones," she murmured. "And yet I feel no claim worth blood." Jon brushed her hand. "We build anew." Inside the busted throne room, the Iron Throne lay collapsed. twisted blades fused by dragonfire and alchemical blaze, into a grotesque, half-melted idol. Moonlight pierced roof gaps, painting the ruin silver. Rats scurried across blackened flagstones. Bran's chair was wheeled forward by Podrick until he sat before the ruin. He raised a hand. Unsullied set torches and sconces, bathing the chamber in amber glow. Daenerys approached the molten relic. She ran fingertips over dull metal warped beyond recognition. "This is what guided me across oceans." Tyrion stood behind her. "Sometimes, the lodestar of our youth sets behind clouds. We follow out of habit until we learn to steer by new lights." Daenerys drew a slow breath, then turned to Jon. "Melt it completely." Jon hesitated. "Rhaegal's fires may collapse the floor. Wildfire still pools beneath." Bran's gaze turned northward, distant. "Dragonfire guided by purpose may burn precise as a surgeon's blade." His voice took on resonant timbre, as if channeling some older wisdom. "Ask the dragon politely, and it will strike only where you bid." Jon exchanged a glance with Daenerys. She nodded. Together, they stepped outside to beckon Drogon and Rhaegal. The beasts folded through shattered archways, talons scraping stone. Unsullied retreated to courtyard edges. Sellsword guards fled entirely. Daenerys placed her palm to Drogon's muzzle. Jon pressed his to Rhaegal's. In hushed Valyrian they whispered command. "Breathe, but only upon the iron." The dragons' throats glowed. Twin streams of white-hot fire speared the throne, engulfing it in blinding glare. The stone dais liquefied. Molten iron dripped like tears, pooling in a glowing basin hastily carved by heat. Smoke billowed. Embers crackled. But walls remained intact. Floor unbroken. Miracle of will over chaos. When fire ceased, an incandescent puddle shimmered where the throne had stood. Slowly, its glow faded to dull red, then black. What remained was unrecognizable. No blades, no barbs, only an amorphous lump of slag. Daenerys turned away first, exhaling. Cheeks wet, though no tears fell. Jon rested a hand upon her shoulder, felt her tremble once, then steady. Bran wheeled closer. "The realms wound as cauterized," he whispered. Sansa's raven arrived that evening with parchment detailing Winterfell's planting progress and news of Arya's success pacifying specters. Jon read it by lantern, a tug of longing thudding inside. He penned reply describing the melted throne and Bran's vision for the living seat, then sealed it with black wax impressed by signet, showing direwolf and dragon entwined around a shoot of weirwood. A new device Tyrion had designed en route, now cast in iron. He sent Ghost north with the raven, trusting the direwolf to wend home quicker than wings. Days slid into rhythms of restoration. Unsullied carpenters shored up the Red Keep's crumbling walls. Dothraki cleared rubble from the palace gardens, discovering surviving lemon trees, bowed under fruit fragrant as memory. Jon organized grain distribution to starving wards, receiving cautious gratitude from smallfolk. Daenerys supervised digging of wells where collapsed cisterns risked plague, her silver hair visible above trenches as she hauled mud-soaked buckets beside commoners, who stared in astonishment at a queen who labored like a peasant. At dusk Tyrion unrolled maps of the Isle of Faces upon a carved table in Maegor's holdfast, one of few chambers still roofed. Inked scribbles by Candlemas scholars described groves of ancient weirwoods untouched by Andal axes. "The green men there will not join council simply because we asked politely," he warned. "Stories paint them as guardians older than kingdoms." Bran studied the map. "Dottie, they will speak through root and leaf. They require listeners, not envoys, Dot." He touched a finger to a cove drawn at the island's north tip. "Land here. Follow the White Elk path. At the heart of the grove stands a hollow tree. I will go within. The rest of you wait without." Daenerys frowned. "The isle lies in the God's Eye. Waters there are haunted by water wights, if tavern tales are true." Jon sheathed calm after nightly sharpening. "We'll take Rhaegal and Drogon across the lake. No wight dare breach flames." Tyrion cleared his throat. Considering wildfire pockets may linger beneath the lake's surface from Maegor's old stores, perhaps caution. But, he raised hands under their glares. "Dragons it is." Arrangement set. They embarked 3 mornings later. Bran carried by Jon aboard Rhaegal, Daenerys astride Drogon, a small contingent of unsullied rowers guiding 2 longboats laden with offerings. Ambergris mined dragonglass, living seedlings from a Winterfell sapling, and a red rose cutting from Highgarden's last bloom. Rippling reflections of dragons jittered upon silver water as they crossed. Disturbed fish leapt, scales reflecting dawn like sparks. They landed upon a shingle beach where fog clung to moss-slick stones. The trees beyond stood ancient and massive, pale as bone, their leaves crimson even in the languid cusp of summer's end. The air smelled of loam and strange sweetness, like memory of apples in autumn. Bran instructed the others to remain. Podrick and Grey Worm formed perimeter. Daenerys traced the runes carved in her arak, restless. Jon followed Bran into the grove until reminded by Bran's glance to stop at a boundary ringed by mushroom circles. Bran proceeded alone down a corridor of towering trunks whose faces were endless. Sorrow, joy, rage, serenity. Each expression frozen in bleeding sap. Jon felt prickle along his nape, as though eyes carved of wood now watched his blood pulse. Time passed, unmeasured yet heavy. Daenerys paced near the beach, occasionally scanning sky for threats. Rhaegal dozed, wings half furling. Drogon fidgeted, sniffing air as if scenting something older than man. The Unsullied remained statues save for subtle pivot of spears. At length, a sound rose from the grove. Not voice, not rustling leaves, but resonance like wind chimes, made of heartstrings. Jon drew calm an inch. Daenerys' eyes widened in awe rather than dread. Bran emerged, face pale, eyes dark wells. Behind him stepped figures clad in living bark, torsos laced with vines, eyes gold and luminous. Children of the forest. Their number was 6. They moved with sinuous grace, hands tipped in clawed roots. For a moment Jon's breath hitched at their alien beauty and primal power. One, tallest among them, approached Jon and Daenerys, tilting head. Her voice when it came resembled wind through reeds. Seed of dragon. Old songs guide you. She placed a bark-skinned palm upon Daenerys' wounded arm. The bandage unwound itself in invisible breeze, revealing pink scar already sealed. The child whispered, "Balance." She turned to Bran. "Green's ear, you have shown them the first leaf. Grow the rest." Bran inclined his head. "We would craft a living seat for realms of men." The child touched Bran's shoulder. "Then take our blessing and branch." She signaled to others. 2 approached bearing a sapling hardly larger than a staff. Its trunk pale, leaves mottled red-green as if still deciding season. They set it in Bran's lap. Its roots wriggled, anchoring through seams of his blanket, as though eager for soil. Daenerys stared, astonished. "It lives without ground." "It seeks its ground," the child replied. "Plant it where swords once drank blood. Water with dragonfire at dawn. Let roots drink the scream of ash and the sigh of snow. Then the seat will grow." Jon sheathed calm fully and bowed. "A warrior's respect. We are grateful." The child brushed her fingers across his brow. Warmth suffused him. A burst of summer orchard tinged by winter mint. "Protect the seed." "Son of ice and fire," she whispered. "Great storms yet gather." Without further word the children retreated into the grove, melting like mist. Bran wheeled back, sapling in lap, expression unreadable, but for a tremor at his mouth's corner, something between relief and fear. Returning voyage across the lake was silent, save for gentle lapping. In King's Landing they installed the sapling within the molten basin where the throne had pooled. Before dawn, Jon and Daenerys stood side by side as first sun rays pierced roof gaps. They guided Rhaegal and Drogon to breathe gentle gouts of flame around the sapling. Never upon. White bark darkened, then glowed faint green. Leaves spread like hands greeting a new day. From charred rubble sprouted life. Word spread faster than raven flight. The throne of blades reborn as throne of roots. Delegations from Storm's End and Driftmark arrived early to glimpse wonder. Even old Lord Tarley of Hornhill, once bitter enemy, arrived cloaked in humility, offering seeds of his own orchards to line the throne room floor. Jon wrote to Sansa describing the living seat's first shoots curling toward the sky. He spoke of children of the forest, walking beneath waking wood, of dragons tempered to gardeners, of hope budding among stone. He ended with words meant only for her. My heart is rooted in Winterfell, though my hands shape distant soil. Ghost returns tomorrow carrying this letter. When he lies beneath your hearth, know my thoughts lie there too. But peace, like frost atop shallow pond, cracks easily. 3 nights after the sapling's planting, a scream split the palace ward. Jon raced to Bran's chambers to find unsullied guards slain, throats slit with obsidian shard. Bran's bed was overturned. The window hung open upon empty darkness. Muddy prints shaped like taloned paws marred the sill. A raven perched nearby, wings twitching, but when Jon approached it flapped into the night, dropping a single scale, blue, crystalline, humming with chill. The old enemy had not died entirely. It had learned patience instead. And now the Greenseer, the realm's memory, was taken. Jon's roar shook hallways. Daenerys burst from her quarters, hair loose, eyes blazing. What has happened? Jon showed her the shard. She recognized the color, the hue of necrotic frost from the cryomancers of Ashai tales. Tyrion arrived panting, grasping his torch. Kidnapping inside the Red Keep? He cursed. Someone plays at ghosts. Searching parties spread across city and shore. Drogon soared above, Rhaegal below. Sansa's raven arrived amid chaos bearing joyous report of newborn direwolf cubs in Godswood. Its timing felt cruel. Jon held the parchment like a lifeline while rage churned inside. At dawn, a hooded figure approached the gate, hands raised. Guards leveled spears, but she spoke before blades struck. I know where they've taken the boy, announced Melisandre. The Red Priestess thought gone beyond seas. Her ruby choker pulsed bloodlight. The last signs of shadow gather at the dragon pit to perform unholy rite. Jon's jaw clenched. He remembered the priestess's role in his own unholy return, a debt never comfortably reconciled. Why help us now? Light and shadow war within me. She answered, voice brittle with years. I have walked deserts seeking absolution. The fire shows your brother bound upon black altar. If he dies, night will bloom again across the world. I would not see my errors repeated. Daenerys' gaze burned suspicious. Melisandre held it unflinching, but her expression implored. Trust in our lore or trust in need, she said. Either way, follow me before the hour turns. Jon turned to Grey Worm. Arm 50 spears. Quiet march. He mounted Rhaegal, though dawn barely colored sky. Daenerys climbed Drogon. Tyrion and Davos joined a ground party weaving through alleys. The dragon pit's ancient dome now resembled a bleached rib cage. Inside, shattered dragon bones lay scattered like prophecy's debris. In the central ring, cultists clad in black furs circled Bran's chair, chanting in guttural tongue. Their hands glowed blue, weaving coils of frost that bound Bran in shimmering chains. At their center towered a pale woman crowned in icicles, one who might once have been human, now host to leftover shade of the Night King. Melisandre hissed, Frost Maiden, and bid Jon to strike now. Dragons descended like meteors. Drogon's roar thundered, but Frostmaiden raised a hand, conjuring barrier of crystalline cold that repelled fire. Rhaegal slammed tail, shattering cultists beneath. Grey Worm spears drove through gap, unsullied dying by dozens to frostblades that shattered them like glass. Jon leapt from saddle, calm glowing faintly with green glyphs the children had carved into its steel as ward. Each swing met icy magic and cut through. He reached Bran as the Frost Maiden unleashed swirl of frozen knives. Daenerys pivoted, channeling Drogon's flame into narrow stream, aimed where Frost Maiden's shield flickered. Melisandre, chanting, thrust her ruby into the beam of fire. The gem refracted crimson light into the shield's fissures. The barrier cracked. Flame speared through. Frost Maiden screamed as ice melted from her form. Underneath lay a broken woman, whose veins ran blue. Jon rammed calm through her heart. Ice exploded outward in white dust that settled over dragon bones like new snow. Chains of frost crumbled from Bran. Jon hoisted him from chair. Heart hammering. Bran blinked, breath fogging. "They sought to graft Winter's memory into my mind," he murmured. Voice raw dots. "To resurrect the Night King through dream." Daenerys landed beside them, eyes wet from smoke and effort. "Are you harmed?" "Not yet," Bran answered. He inspected shattered cultists. But this was only seed of darker bloom. Someone, somewhere, still feeds the cold that lingers. Jon sheathed calm. "Then our work is far from over." Melisandre approached, ruby dull. "Light burns brightest before darkness fights back," she warned, then turned away, cloak fluttering like dying ember. She disappeared into labyrinth of bones, leaving only faint scent of saffron. They returned to Red Keep at sunrise. Bran directed Unsullied to bury Frost Maiden's remains in glass candles melted by dragonfire. "Containment," he said, "so echoing whispers cannot find new host." Later, as Jon washed blood from arms of Stark and Targaryen, Sansa's next raven aride, the cubs opened their eyes, each one blue-gray like your own. Jon felt tear escape unconsciously. He penned reply. "Eyes here have seen horrors, but also hope. Keep the cubs safe. Remember I walked back to you through fire and frost." He sealed letter, affixed to raven, watched it vanish northward. Overhead, the living throne sapling unfurled another leaf, its color shifting from crimson to vivid emerald. Jon reached to touch it, felt pulse beneath bark. Slow, strong, promising. Daenerys joined him, her own hand reaching for his. Their fingers brushed, not yet intertwined, but lingering. Behind them, dragons nested among broken towers, wings sheltering seedlings of new dawn. And though shadows still stretched long, the song the world sang swelled with chords of roots, thrusting through iron and flames, coaxed to nurture rather than destroy. It was no longer dirge. It was unfinished symphony awaiting next verse. A.K. Moonlight spilled across the shattered floor of Maegor's holdfast. Shimmering off rivulets of molten iron still cooling around the newborn sapling. The tree's slender trunk rose less than a man's height, yet its branches, already tipped in blood-red buds, cast a lattice of shadows against the broken ceiling like veins seeking new flesh. Jon Snow lingered beneath that fragile canopy long after the healers coaxed Bran back to his chamber. After Grey Worm set fresh sentries at every arch, after even the torchlight dwindled to coals. He traced a fingertip down the sapling's bark. Warmth pulsed there. Faint, rhythmic, reminiscent of dragon heartbeats. Soft footfalls approached. Daenerys stopped beside him, the hem of her wool cloak brushing charred flagstones. Her silver hair, undone, poured over her shoulders like strands of winter starlight. For a time they stood without speaking, listening to distant breakers along Blackwater Bay, to restless horses stamping in the ruined stables, to the sapling's own whisper. So quiet it might have been imagination. Bran said the tree would drink, scream, and sigh. Jon murmured at last, "Do you hear them?" Daenerys closed her eyes. "I hear the city breathe for the first time in years. No bells tolling doom, no crowds baying for blood, only wind." She opened her eyes. Violet depths glinted with reflection of glowing iron. But wind can turn. Jon let his hand fall. Frost Maiden's cult won't be last to crawl from shadows. Power vacuums draw every sort of carrion. Daenerys glanced upward through the broken roof. Stars wheeled beyond jagged stone like sparks escaping a forge. "We rebuild, quickly. Give people purpose before fear finds them first." Her gaze shifted to him. "And you must write Sansa to send masons south. The Red Keep will not mend itself." "Already done." Jon managed a faint smile. Shall dispatch Master Farlan and 20 journeymen at first thaw. Daenerys' answering smile held gratitude mixed with fatigue. She leaned one shoulder against his, seeking warmth. For a moment, they were only two tired souls held together by shared burdens. The memory of dragon's fire and the quiet hope of living wood. Dawn brought the stink of boiled pitch, the clang of hammers, the caw of corvids swirling above scaffolds. Davos Seaworth commandeered the city's ragged masons, setting them to buttress weakened walls. Tyrion established a provisional council that met each sunrise in the remnants of the small hall, now roofless, but swept clean of debris and hung with hastily sewn banners. The dire wolf dragon of Stark Targaryen, the sun spear of Dorne, the crowned stag of Baratheon, the silver trident of the Riverlands, the 3 golden wheat stalks of the Reach. Seats for Storm's End Pike, and the Vale remained draped in black cloth to mark their lord's absence. Jon sat at the northern side of the circular table, calm propped against his thigh, ghost curled at his boots. Daenerys occupied the opposite seat, posture regal yet unarmored, no crown, no dragon pins, only a plain leather jerkin and the sling removed from her healing arm. Bran's wheeled chair rested between them, the sapling's green shroud visible against his lap blanket. Sir Brienne represented the Riverlands until Lord Edmure could travel. Melissa Florent spoke for Storm's End in Gendry's stead while he organized relief caravans. Sir Lyn Corbray appeared for the Vale, unreconciled but curious. Yara Greyjoy had not yet answered summons. Princess Arianne of Dorne arrived 2 days past, silk cloak stained by road dust, her amber eyes assessing every corner of the ruin. Tyrion rapped knuckles on the makeshift oak surface. First matter: a date for the Great Moot. Ravens report most lords can reach King's Landing by the Feast of the Maiden. He glanced at Jon and Daenerys. 7 weeks. Corbray scoffed. If the neck remains passable. Rumors of ice specters in the marsh have traitors turning back. Bran's eyes clouded. Not specters. Remnants. Small, directionless. If left alone, they will fade with spring. Many. Arianne arched a brow. We Sunspearians would gladly skewer a few wraiths to guarantee safe passage. Daenerys shook her head. Steel scatters them but does not end their essence. Leave them, and they dissolve under sun. She paused. But send outriders along the King's Road to calm merchant fears. Perception can kill faster than claws. Tyrion nodded, quill scratching. Outriders dispatched. Now, the question of regency. Even a provisional throne of roots needs voice until the moot crowns law. Who speaks royal edicts? Medin? Eyes turned toward Jon and Daenerys. Jon's jaw tensed. He opened his mouth, but Bran spoke first. Neither wolf nor dragon must rule alone, he said. Both must speak through counsel. He lifted a hand toward Tyrion. The hand will transcribe edicts. Each must bear twin seals, Stark and Targaryen. Signed together, else they do not stand. Silence rippled. Corbray exhaled. Brienne inclined her head. Acceptance. Arianne smiled as though she'd predicted this. Tyrion's lips twitched. And if the wolf and dragon disagree? Bran's pupils contracted. Shards of moonlight. They will learn agreement. While council hammered laws, Arya Stark prowled the alleys beyond Flea Bottom, mapping every rat hole where frost cultists might hide. She disguised herself as washerwoman, tanner's son, Bravusi minstrel, faces shifting, feet silent. Gendry accompanied her at times, forging iron nails into throwing spikes disguised as embroidery needles. Together, they discovered caches of cryo shards beneath the black cells, symbols of spiral frost etched on walls. Arya left one mark of her own. A snarling wolf scratched over every spiral, warning the shadowed faithful their hush was cracked. In the north, Sansa labored. Snow still deep, yet fields near the White Knife bristled with hardy grain imported from the Reach, sprouting like stubborn hope beneath pale sun. She visited the new direwolf pups. 5 in number, coats a motley of gray and white. One black-furred runt clambered into her lap, nipping at her leather laces. Shadow, she named it, in memory of winter's lingering shade. Ghost observed from afar during her visits, tail twitching approval. Letters rode back and forth. Jon wrote nightly. Lists of lumber required, descriptions of council debates, sketches of Bran's sapling as it split into twin trunks twisting upward like clasped fingers. Sansa answered with harvest counts, road conditions, and small anecdotes. Lady Lyanne Ormont swearing at plows, Tormund Giantsbane teaching small folk children to ride shaggy northern garrons. Under starlight, Jon would unfold her parchment, tracing her deliberate script, sensing her presence like heat beneath cold armor. When sleep eluded him, he climbed to the bluff overlooking Blackwater Bay, where Rhaegal roosted. The dragon recognized his restlessness, nuzzling until Jon's heartbeat quelled. Sometimes Daenerys joined. They would lean against Rhaegal's warm belly, two riders tethered by griefs too vast for words. 2 weeks before the Feast of the Maiden, word arrived that Euron's last Reaver fleet had struck salt pans, slaying 36 fisherfolk and stealing grain bound for King's Landing. The Raven carried Yara's terse request, permission to hunt blood for blood. Jon crumpled the parchment, eyes flaring. Tyrion advised caution. Euron's retreat might lure them into trap, but Daenerys overruled. She penned orders authorizing Yara to sail west with 4 of the Crown's war galleys, each fitted with scorpions designed by Qyburn but improved by Gendry. Lighter arms, faster load, shafts tipped in dragonglass. Iron kills iron, she wrote, sealing with wolf dragon wax.awak, but leaves salt for seeds to grow. Jon approved with his own seal, though his script trembled. That night he dreamt of dark waves swallowing shattered swords. Bran's dreams were stranger. Podrick found him at dawn muttering in tongues, eyes white. The sapling beside his bed had grown overnight, vines creeping across floorboards toward a crack in the wall that led to sunlight. When Bran woke, he ordered the tree transplanted to the throne room basin immediately. Staying indoors choked its roots. Gardeners worked all day, sliding the living throne into place. As soil packed around its trunk, leaves unfurled broader than a man's hand, mottled red and green, with veins luminous as aurora. Ravens perched upon branches, croaking as if curating history in real time. At twilight, Tyrion orchestrated a ceremony. He fetched 2 chairs, plain sturdy benches carved from ships lost at Blackwater Bay, and set them facing the tree's helm-shaped twin trunks. Jon approached first, wearing black surcoat embroidered with a single crimson leaf. Daenerys followed, clad in riding leathers, dyed forest green. Bran sat between them. Melisandre, readmitted by council after interrogation, lit driftwood braziers around the room, flames casting amber hollows. Tyrion's voice carried. Until realm's lords gather, let this living throne stand witness while 2 regents guard its bloom. He drew a blade hammered from leftover slag, short and dull. Its edge bore no barbs. No longer may rulers sit on iron swords. They shall kneel to living wood. He tapped the sapling's roots. Kneel then. Jon and Daenerys exchanged glances, then sank to one knee, swords laid across palms. Bran placed his hands upon their shoulders. Rise as stewards, not kings, he intoned. Caretakers, not conquerors. Speak for land and flame alike. The braziers flared, sending sparks swirling up to brush the leaves. A hush fell like mantle. Afterwards, Daenerys found Jon in the godswood of the Red Keep, a grove of stunted oaks overlooked by burned stumps of one ancient weirwood long ago felled by Aerys. Moonlit water pooled in the dry fountain. Frogs chirped weakly among reeds pushing through cracked marble. Jon reached into the basin, palms filling with stale water, and poured it over roots of a surviving elm. Daenerys watched. Do you regret kneeling to no throne? Jon shook his head. I regret waiting so long to know what peace should look like. She stepped closer. And does peace include us? Her voice carried vulnerability seldom heard. Jon's breath steamed. He turned, their faces inches apart, fractured moonlight glancing off scar on his brow. Peace begins with honesty. He lifted her hand, pressed it to his chest. My heart belongs to North, to Sansa, to what we forged there. He searched her eyes. But my loyalty, my respect, my duty, they belong to you as well. We fight side by side, That bond is not lesser. Daenerys' lashes flickered. I can accept that. A smile. Wistful. Perhaps love has many rooms. We needn't close doors. Jon managed a huff that might be laugh. A complicated keep. Worthy of Stark stone and Targaryen flame. Her fingers squeezed his once, then returned to her side. Rest. Tomorrow we draft harvest levies. Tyrion will gnaw our ears off. They parted beneath winter stars, each carrying ember of understanding bright enough to lighten path ahead, yet subtle enough not to blind. Days blurred into sawtooth rhythm. Council, patrols, reconstruction. A river of refugees flowed into the city, farmers from the crown lands bringing surplus corn in exchange for iron tools. Dothraki families claiming scorched lots outside the Mudgate to plant hardy oats. Maesters from Old Town volunteering to rebuild the Citadel's lost library branch burned during Cersei's last stand. Jon greeted them at Outer Bailey beside Daenerys, promising fair trade, land parcels, and protection under the new council's laws. Some bowed confused, others wept. A few spat, but none were turned away. One evening, Arya slipped into the council chamber with parchment, bearing a charcoal rubbing of spiral frost symbol, intersected by a dagger motif, found on cellar wall beneath Dragonstone Street. She reported, "They're recruiting among starving orphans, promising warm nests in a frozen kingdom below the bay." Bran studied the rubbing, fingers brushing the dagger. "They mimic legends of solace and cold," he said. "Lies, but potent for those who lost everything to fire and crown." Daenerys frowned. "We must give them reasons not to listen." "Food and shelter first," Jon agreed. "But also stories. Truth speakers in alley squares. Show them night's cost." He looked to Arya. "Gather survivors of Winterfell, men who saw the dead march. Have them speak." Arya's smile was feral. "They'll listen when a one-armed stableboy describes ripping white heads with bare teeth." Melisandre proposed nightly flame vigils in squares. Not sermons of one god, but remembrances. Fire to keep cold at bay. The council consented. Under torches, small folk listened to soldiers recount the Battle of Icefields. Some wept at tales of children clinging to dead mothers. Others cheered hearing how dragons swooped to burn death. Between speeches, food kitchens ladled stew. Healers treated frost-nipped beggars. Scribes recorded names of missing loved ones. Slowly, spiral symbols were scrubbed away, replaced by chalk drawings of direwolves guarding saplings under moons. Yet darkness gathered elsewhere. Ravens from the Eyrie reported sudden snow squalls out of season. Swirling around the bloody gate, freezing sentries in armor. A Mirish lens maker traveling through Weeping Town saw mist figures stalking barrows, eyes glowing faint indigo. His account ended in smudged ink. In Old Town, Grand Maester Runciter wrote of white fever spreading among stevedores. Skin paling, voices muttering in forgotten tongues. Tyrion spread these reports across council table like dagger cards. "We are patching cuts while infection spreads unseen," he warned. Bran closed his eyes, slipped into green dream. When he returned, his face gray. Winter's echo hunts the weirwood roots. It grows where resentment festers, where man curses man and soil drinks tears. "Bendo," Corbray spat. "Poetry won't plug holes in our shield wall." He jerked thumb at Jon. "Send the dragons north again. Burn any mist that moves." Jon's fist tightened over Com's pommel. "Fire alone won't cure hearts." Daenerys added, "We cannot scorch every valley. We build bonds first, make people allies against cold, not victims of flame." Corbray grumbled, but Brienne voiced quiet support. Arianne nodded thoughtfully, desert eyes keen. And so it was agreed. Ambassadors would depart to each troubled region. Diplomats paired with soldiers, healers paired with storytellers. Jon chose Davos to sail west to Old Town with Melisandre, escorted by 10 unsullied and a crate of glowing red candles. The fire magi of Volantis had promised those candles might draw white fever toward heat and dissolve it. Daenerys dispatched Ser Jorah, recently recovered from being wounded in the Frostmaiden's assault, north to the Vale. carrying seeds from the living throne and scrolls of legal amnesty for mountain clans, willing to defect from cold cults. Arya volunteered to accompany him disguised as squire. Jorah accepted with wry nod. Tyrion prepared to ride to the Reach to negotiate with Lady Redwine, taking Podrick and 3 scribes. Someone must teach them how to price grain without robbing starving city dwellers, he quipped. Bran insisted on remaining in King's Landing, bound to Throne's growth, but sent ravens daily woven with his mind's observations. Dream maps that glimmered on parchment, revealing shifting cold pockets like ink frost. Meanwhile, Yara Greyjoy's fleet cornered Euron's long ship off Lonely Light, firing dragonglass bolts that shattered its hull. They found only deserted decks stained with dried brine. Below hold lay mounds of black-scaled armor, never worn by human shape, exuding chill. Yara seized armor and torched the ship. Her raven arrived bearing shards fused from fire and ice for the council to study. Gendry hammered one shard against anvil. It rang like distant chimes, then cracked into velvet vapor. Magic glass, he muttered, wiping sweat. Daenerys saved a piece in lead box, instructing Tyrion to place it beneath the throne roots. Let living wood test its resilience. Under the root basin, the shard melted slowly until veins of dark crystal threaded downwards, then halted, imprisoned by green energy. Bran smiled faintly. Balance holds, he said. On eve of Feast of Maiden, the First Lords arrived. Lord Gendry Baratheon rode through Roserod Gate astride black destrier, armor polished, stag sigil newly gilded. He bowed to Daenerys, then knelt to Tree Throne, pledging Storm's End to Council's will. Next came Lady Margaery's cousin Ilyn Tyrell, bearing bushels of late roses. Her retinue pitched tents scented with lavender to mask city stink. Lord Royce of Vale marched in clad head-to-toe bronze, Corbray sighing relief. The Dornish banner rippled alongside. Arianne welcomed cousin Quentyn, scarred but alive, with kiss on each cheek. Even Lady Shireen Baratheon, freed from Dragonstone's dark past, arrived as Stormland's envoy for royal princess line. But whispers preceded the one arrival most dreaded. Cersei's last loyal claimant, Sir Tariq Lannister, rumored alive after disappearing during riot years ago. He rode in, under white flag. Eyes wary, silver streak in golden hair. Tyrion confronted him outside city walls. Words passed, tense. At last Tyrek agreed to stand, not as rival but as witness, representing orphans of war. Tyrion allowed entry, though wariness lingered. On the morning of Moot, bells tolled not from Septi, still rubble, but from smiths' hammers against hollow bronze shells lifted atop belfries. Their tones resonated new hope, rather than terror. Crowds filled riverbank avenues to watch procession. Local guilds carrying offerings, loaves, wooden toys, bolts of dyed wool, placed at root of throne like seeds. Inside Throne Hall, benches formed 7 great arcs around sapling. Jon stood to one side, Sansa's latest letter tucked against his breast. A sprig of weirwood bud pressed between parchment, her words. Let each leaf be second heartbeat of North. He would carry it during deliberations. Daenerys entered opposite, Drogon's distant shadow crossing stained glass shards high above. She wore cloak woven from grey direwolf pelts gifted by Sansa, fastened by dragonbone brooch. Tyrion announced her not as queen, but as keeper of flame. Jon was declared warder of winter. Titles new, heavy, yet shared. Proceedings began with Bran recounting tale of long night, voice echoing as if amplified by weirwood hearts. He spoke of alliances forged, of cost paid, of frost echo still stalking. The enemy thrives where we break faith with one another, he said. So build faith. Then each lord rose to swear what they would offer. Gendry promised half Stormland's harvests. Tyrell's pledged engineers. Royce volunteer miners from Vale. Dorne offered water engineers. Shireen Baratheon, thin but radiant, promised to convert Dragonstone for medical alchemy. Even Tyrek Lannister produced coffers of gold smuggled from Casterly Rock's secret vault to fund orphanage network. In return, council would grant representation proportionate to aid. 1 vote per region, plus an 1/8 for common folk chosen by city election. Applause rolled like summer thunder. Final matter. Ratification of the throne of living wood as symbol. Tyrion read draft. Let no blade adorn seat. Let no single hand clasp root. Let it grow beyond reach of mortal greed. Let it die should realm fracture. Let regents dwell beneath, not above. All 7 lords placed seals. The 8th seat remained for common folk. A baker named Hobgrass, selected by drawing of lots among guilds, timidly stepped forth and stamped with flour-coated thumb. Melisandre sprinkled candle wax around basin, intoning prayer not to Erlor alone, but to light that warms and light that guides. The leaves rustled though no wind touched hall. Sapling glinted gold-green, then shed first full leaf, drifting downward to land on Bran's lap. He lifted it for all to see. Veins shimmering both red and white, a marriage of blood and snow. Cheers erupted. Yet outside, clouds boiled slate dark. A chill wind whipped banners into knots. Corvids cawed alarm. Arya, stationed atop broken tower, scanned horizon. Over Blackwater's steely waters rose a bank of fog swirling like wounded beast. Within churned silhouettes of prowheads formed from ice and bone. Eyes glowed azure. She sprinted down spiral, boots pounding. 2 arms, her cry ricocheted. Horns answered, deep and urgent. The moot shattered into scrambling tumult. Lords seizing swords, unsullied forming shield walls, Dothraki mounting. Jon and Daenerys met at courtyard, dragons already sensing threat. Drogon roared from rampart perch, Regal launched from stables. Fog swept gates. Frost ships glided across bay. Hulls silent. From their decks leapt warriors clad in armor of frozen scales, wielding axes that fumed cold mist. At center prow stood figures 7 feet tall, draped in cloak of raven feathers rimed with frost. Face hidden behind helm fashioned from shard of ice, shaped like wolf's head. Bran's gasp carried across courtyard as he rolled forward. "The cold wolf," he whispered. "A dream of vengeance born in the crypts." Daenerys drew her Eric. Jon drew calm. "Protect the throne," he ordered Grey Worm. But Bran wheeled past them, eyes turning white. "No, I must face it. He is part of me." Shadow of Stark blood twisted by winter's memory, his voice distant as wind crossing graves. Jon hesitated, then nodded. "We guard your flank." Bran glided into fog beyond gate, Podrick pushing chair. Jon, Daenerys, Arya, Brienne flanked. Frost warriors advanced. Drogon soared overhead, unleashing fire. Flames sputtered against their armor but melted weak points. Unsullied spears pierced. Dothraki screamed war songs. City shook. Cold Wolf stepped onto charred plaza, frost blooming underfoot. He lifted hand. Ice tendrils shot toward Bran. Jon bisected them with calm. Steel hum echoing root heart. Arya hurled dragonglass needles. Brienne shielded Bran's side. Daenerys called Drogon to strafe, but Cold Wolf raised helm, absorbing flame into crystal crest, converting to swirl of snow that blasted back. Drogon keened, battered. Bran's voice rang, amplified. "You are grief of Stark line made flesh. I offer peace." His eyes blazed green beneath lids. Tree throne within hall glowed, roots pulsating. Cold Wolf snarled wordlessly, hefted axe toward Bran. Jon stepped, blocking. Axe met calm. Frost shards exploded, numbing his arm. Daenerys darted, slicing with arak, carving chunk of icy hide. Steam hissed. Arya slipped under swing, stabbing knee joint. Crack formed but froze again. Bran closed his eyes, entering weirwood net. Leaves trembled, gale rising inside hall though no doors open. Roots burst through flagstones beneath plaza, twisting like serpents, wrapping around Bran's chair, lifting him upright as though tree carried him. Cold Wolf hesitated. From branches above, ravens erupted. Hundreds, dive-bombing icy legion, pecking with obsidian beaks. Among them flew one great white raven shining like dawn. It plunged into Cold Wolf's helm. Shattering crest. Light flared, gold, red, green, blinding. Cold Wolf staggered, pieces of helm falling. Beneath, ghostly visage of stark ancestor, features translucent. Bran spoke through raven chorus. Remember warmth. His words wove into song. Old lullaby Ned hummed at Winterfell's hearth. The ghost's expression softened. Ice fissured. Armor cracked. Jon stepped back, voice thick. "Let it go," he whispered to Spectre. Arya lowered dagger. Brienne lowered shield. Cold Wolf dropped axe. Frost veil melted from shoulders, revealing shape of man bearing stark features older than recorded line. He looked at Bran, bowed. Then sunlight speared clouds above, touching plaza. Ice figure dissolved into water that trickled along gutters. Steam rising. Fog receded. Frost warriors crumbled into powder. Ships split as thaw spread through hulls. They sank silently. City exhaled. In courtyard hush, Bran's chair settled onto earth as roots retreated. He slumped, eyes returning brown. Podrick caught him. Daenerys wiped soot from cheek. "Is it over?" she asked. Bran breathed, voice faint. "Winter's echo is stilled. Not destroyed, stilled. Cannot kill shadow without killing light. But balance restored." Crowd gathered beyond gate cheered. Lords emerged, stunned. Sapling in throne hall bloomed cluster of white blossoms edged crimson. First flowers in 300 years to grow inside Red Keep. Jon cleaned calm, sliding blade home. He turned to Daenerys, who stared at blossoms through archway tears. He extended hand. She took it. That night, feasting fires replaced battle pyres. Long tables lined streets, bakers thrust loaves. Dornish poured wine. Reach minstrels strummed lutes. Dragons roosted atop tower of the hand, wings folded like banners. Jon found Sansa's letter in pocket, pressed to heart, whispered, "We held." He would write her at dawn, no now. He borrowed quill from scribe, crouched on steps, ink trembling on parchment. "My dearest Sansa," the roots held against last echo of winter. Bran's courage quenched grief's fury. "The tree now bears flowers brighter than torchlight. I felt your hand upon my sword, your voice in each breath. Soon I ride north to bring you south. To stand in council garden where wolves lie down beside dragons. Until then, hold the cubs. Teach them snow may melt yet still be holy. With all that I am, Jon." "Ban." He sealed letter, tied to ghost's collar. The direwolf trotted through gate into night road, eager to run home. Daenerys approached, holding cup of warmed honey wine. She handed it. "To balance," she said. "To balance," he echoed, sipping. Tyrion joined, cheeks flushed. "And to builders willing to tear down what they love for world they'll never fully see." He raised goblet. Arya smirked. "And to wolves who bite darkness leg off." Brienne laughed, clang of steel gauntlet on goblet. Arianne twirled, skirt flaring like desert sunrise. Gendry kissed her temple. Melisandre watched flames, silent gratitude in her eyes. High above, Bran guided ravens across star-washed sky, mind sailing gentle currents of warm air, at last free of frost claw. In throne hall, saplings blossoms opened wider, petals releasing faint fragrance of pine and summer snow. Roots burrowed deeper, wrapping molten iron remains in tender embrace, converting memory of blades into soil rich with forgiveness. And through alleys, children chased each other wielding wooden direwolf masks, shouting tales of Dragon Queen and Snow King, who knelt to living tree, who tamed cold shadow not with iron might, but with harmony of root and flame. Their laughter rose, carried by breezes now smelling of pine and distant roses, rather than soot. Somewhere beyond walls, wildflowers pushed through scorched earth where frost maiden's crystals had melted, petals white as first snow, centers red as dragonfire. Morning would come soon, fresh, unsure, but wholly theirs to shape. Smoke from the last victory fires drifted in low gray ribbons across the courtyards of the Red Keep, laced with the sweeter scent of honey-roasted pheasant and Dornish citrus. Morning had broken clear and sharp, gilding every shard of broken stone with light, the color of pale gold. But the city still slumbered in the long exhale that follows calamity turned celebration. Jon Snow rose before dawn, his dreams still echoing with raven's wings and the fading wail of that wolf-helmed shade, and crossed the silent galleries barefoot, so as not to wake the healers dozing on benches outside Bran's door. He paused there, hand on the rough frame, listening. Inside, the soft, steady hiss of Bran's breath answered him, accompanied by the faint, rhythmic rustle of leaves. The transplanted branch of the living throne that Briar, the youngest of the gardener girls, had insisted on laying in a clay pot near Bran's bedside. Its buds had quickened overnight, unfurling tiny five-lobed leaves streaked pearly white down their centers, as though declaring the boy's survival with living heraldry. Jon slipped away, armor unbelted, and made for the terrace balconied above Blackwater Bay. The vast sweep of water lay quiet under a lavender dawn, sea-misted and silver as first forged steel. A few fishing cogs already bobbed near the mouth of the river where the floating docks had been hastily rebuilt. Their nets hung dark and dripping, promising the city fresh breakfast. Farther out, charred hulks of the frost ships still smoldered in patches. Gendry had supervised dragging them toward the mouth of the bay, where the current would carry the last of the cursed timber into the open sea. But pockets of unnatural ice had lingered in the beams, hissing each time the waves kissed them. Now they steamed faintly, pale coils twisting up and dissipating into morning sun. He drew the raw air deep into his lungs and held it, letting the salt scrub away a night's worth of worry. Ghost padded from the stairwell moments later, ears pricked. He pressed his muzzle against Jon's hand, accepting a scratch behind one snowy ear before sitting quietly at his side. Neither needed words. The hush itself felt hallowed. The click of a boot heel on broken tile announced Daenerys. She wore no crown. She never would, not again. But a simple riding coat dyed the deep green of summer pine, lacing at her throat with a silver dragonbone clasp. The sight of her set something inside Jon gently at ease. A memory flashed of the two of them on the walls, top walk beneath a sky awash with strange aurora, wondering what lay south beyond the storms. She came to the balustrade and stood without speaking, shoulder brushing his. After a time, she set a leather folio on the rail between them. Rhaegal found the courier boat you sent to Sansa. She murmured. It made good time. Ghost must be swift indeed. Jon's mouth curved. He always is. I thought you might want to read the answer before today's audiences. She tapped the folio. Jon flipped the thong. Inside lay fresh parchment, scented faintly of snowmelt and pine tar. Sansa's script filled 3 pages, each line precise yet flowing where her earlier letters had formed tight, cautious rows. She wrote of the harvest's resilience, of Lyanna Mormont browbeating half the Glover's men into digging new drainage trenches, of Tormund bragging that the frost wraiths fled north at the mere rumor of his new red beard. She wrote of Arya's direwolf pups, shadows stealing roasted hare, dusk chewing through the straps of the mead barrels, and of old Nan's surviving stories being copied by Wintertown children who could finally sit by warmed hearths. And near the end, in ink slightly darker, weightier where the quill had paused, she wrote of her own heart, how it beat steadier each morning she woke to letters sealed in twin wax stamps of wolf and dragon, how the North's people no longer whispered about stolen kingship, but spoke, calmly, of shared stewardship, how they began to look south, not with fear, but with hesitation brightened by curiosity. She closed with, tell the tree my breath is on the wind toward it. When its flowers fall, I will be there to catch them. With faith that does not falter. Sansa. Jon read those lines twice, then folded the letter carefully. She comes, he said simply. A warmth spread through him that not even the bite of dawn air could dim. She does, Daenerys agreed, soft. Ghost chuffed as if amused. Sunlight climbed the crenellations. Below, the city woke. Smithy hammers rang, gulls shrieked. Merchant criers hawked honey-glazed flatbread, and oysters dredged from less tainted shallows. The sound rolled up the hill, a frictional hum of a living place mending itself. Daenerys watched it unfold, like a general surveying a map. "Tyrion drafted the first charter of representation last night," she said. "He wants your eye before it's read to the lords." Jon nodded. "After breakfast. Then we ride the circuit of the outer market again. Let them see both of us. They already see too much of me." She smiled wryly at the cut across her cheekbone, healing now but still neat and pink. "Some of the children call me the Fire Mother. I am not sure if it is affectionate or terrified. You gave them heat for the first winter's night in months." Jon held her gaze. "Affection, then." She ducked her head, silver hair veiling her expression. "Still, they stare. They stared at me in Castle Black. Bastards with ghost wolves aren't common either." He paused. "They'll learn to trust, in time." She laughed quietly. "One day you will write a book on earning trust with fewer sword fights. Would be a short book." Jon turned back to the bay. "But I'll try." A horn sounded from the direction of Mudgate, 3 steady notes. Ghost's ears twitched. The morning couriers had arrived. By midday the throne hall brimmed again, not with lords but with journeymen, traders, and aldermen Hobgrass, representing common guilds. The living throne's twin trunks now stretched 2 full arm lengths. Blossoms dotted the upper boughs, each petal pale as first snow save for scarlet tips that bled color inward like ink in water. Under their bower, Tyrion stood atop a low stool, parchment unfurled. "The Charter of Union," he proclaimed, "is neither compact nor treaty but rather a seedbed. It neither compels kneeling nor crowns kings. It binds by common benefit, by oaths of mutual defense, and by the requirement that every major decision passes through Council of 9. 8 seats for regions, 1 for the realm's commons." He glanced at Jon, then Daenerys. "The keepers of Flame and Winter appoint no edicts unilaterally. They sit instead as moderators, casting a deciding vote only in deadlock. In return the regions commit levy of grain, timber, and, most burdensome, of truth. Each lord must maintain a hall of record where scribes post every edict, every copper spent from tax, every bushel requisition. No secrets of governance kept from the governed." "Dendo." Murmurs rippled. Lord Gendry's brow furrowed. Numbers not forging were his weak craft. But Lady Ellen Tyrell leaned forward, eyes bright. Her people had kept ledgers since the age of heroes. Royce grunted approval. Corbray harumphed. Arianne crossed arms, brow raised. Tariq Lannister shifted. "And if a lord declines to provide such transparency?" Daenerys answered, voice calm but carrying. "Then that lord forfeits vote until the record is set straight. Trade privileges may suffer, as will the mercy of their neighbors when famine knocks." Tyrion added, "No lord starves alone. Either he shares his grain during feast times, or his folk will share their torches come famine." A subdued chuckle threaded benches. The charter passed to Hobgrass. The baker's flour-smudged thumb raked across signature line after a brief, resolute nod. Outside, bells rang 3 times to mark ratification, echoing across scaffolding lines. Rookery ravens took wing, messages bound for every market square. "We are of one hearth. Build, barter, believe." The following week unfolded in sweat and sawdust. Carpenters from the Stormlands raised new wooden walkways across the charred quarter near the Dragon Pit, wide enough for wheelbarrows laden with stone from the Vale quarries. Dothraki herders, under Jorah's pragmatic tutelage, staked grazing pens along the eastern slope, planting hardy foxtail to hold the soil. Dornish masons lowered grand sheets of mirrored copper between broken towers to reflect sun into alleys still choked by shadow, brightening rat-ridden recesses. Ironborn shipwrights under Yara hammered hull ribs for a patrol fleet pledged to guard merchant convoys up the Mander. Everywhere banners stitched in the new sigil. Wolf entwined around dragon wrapped with budding branch, flapped from rope lines. Jon spent daylight hours in armor spotted by lime wash and mortar dust, hauling beams, steadying pulleys, lending muscle where needed. At dusk he sparred with unsullied recruits in the outer yard, honing their reflexes against 2 sword forms he'd learned from Arya, while Ghost circled perimeter, low growls discouraging cutpurses who slipped past watchfires. Daenerys rode Drogon far above the city, scorching fields outside the walls in tight spirals, to burn away sorcerous frost. Still lurking under topsoil, then reseeding with reach barley. Her calloused hands returned smelling of smoke and grain. After dark, they convened in a small alcove, overlooking the sapling where Tyrion, quill behind ear, rattled off lists, ship manifests, cloth quotas, track of volunteer scribes. To anyone too slow to escape, Bran rarely left the hall. Eyes closed, he listened to root songs day and night, guiding subtle threads of power that now laced city mortar, reinforcing flood walls against warping tides, coaxing spring buds along the King's Road early enough that travelers would find blossoms instead of blight, come equinox. Sometimes he spoke through ravens perched on parapets, cryptic warnings, storm of tongues near Bitterbridge, dispatch riders, or the frost listens beneath Old Town wells. Jon had grown accustomed to these pronouncements. They never failed to prove accurate. Yet under the hum of rebirth, currents of resistance eddied. 3 nights after the charter's signing, Arya intercepted a set of scrolls carried by a jittery scribe, leaving the ruins of the sea at tide. Under interrogation, the youth confessed allegiance to remnants of the old faith militant, now sworn to a Puritan code blaming dragons, magic, and northern pagan rites for every cataclysm since before Eris. Their clandestine circle, the scales of judgment, met in wine cellars beneath the Street of Sisters, plotting to uproot the living throne and restore a 7-pointed crown. Jon convened a hush council: Daenerys, Tyrion, Gendry, Arianne, Brienne. He laid the scrolls on polished cedar. They number perhaps 30, Arya reported, perched upon the windowsill, one knee drawn up, seeming more shadow than girl. Mostly Septon's apprentices and some half-starved Lannister turncloaks. Brienne frowned. 30 men can still light wildfire under the people, if sermons fan fear. Gendry cracked knuckles. I've heard whispers from smiths outside the new Baylor site. Customers asking for emblem chisels, 7-point stars. Nothing overt, but the talk's there. Daenerys pressed fingertips together. We do not answer faith with steel, or we make martyrs. Tyrion nodded. Agreed. Better to win the Septonate leaders. The High Hall at Old Town still lies without a guiding voice after the fires. We send envoys with grain and cloth, ease their flock's hunger. A fed flock is slower to follow zealots. Then? Arianne smirked. Feed the shepherd and he'll thank you. Feed the sheep and they'll forget the shepherd. Jon considered. We do both. Jorah's riders pass through Old Town soon. Davos can act as envoy, humble enough for wrists unclasped in prayer. Brienne added, and I shall take a small retinue to these so-called scales. Talk first. Let them see a knight of 7 faces who also kneels to living wood. Nesumdasan. Arya slipped from sill, eyes alight. If talk fails, I have other methods. No one doubted. Plans set. They dispersed. Jon lingered at the window's broken edge, looking down upon the dark river. A torchline glowed like molten bronze along the bank. Melisandre's candle vigil. Small folk circled the flames, hand in hand, singing fragments of half-remembered lullabies rather than hymns. Their mingled voices floated up, faint but resolute, like seedlings pushing aside char-tar. Daenerys joined him, cloak drawn tight. Her smile was weary yet satisfied. Every night more come. They'll keep coming, until the last wound closes. She watched the ring of light. And after? After. He exhaled. We learn to live in peace. She placed her hand over his on the rough stone. They stayed until the candles guttered, replaced by eastern stars. Equinox arrived with banners of swallows wheeling above the towers. On that morning, Sansa Stark rode through the Gate of the Gods, flanked by Lyanna Mormont on a shaggy Garren and Jean Poole wearing the green surcoat of the new Scribes Guild. Behind them rolled half a mile of wagons stacked with quarried Nieder stone and crates of sculpted window frames. the Mason's gift. The 5 direwolf pups loped ahead, tumbling over one another in joyous mayhem. City folk lined the boulevard, murmuring wonder when they saw the Lady of Winterfell greeting them with nods and honest smiles, not imperious waves. She had cut her hair shorter than Jon remembered, sun-caught copper brushing her jawline, and the sight struck him like a dawn flare across fresh snow. Jon and Daenerys waited atop the hill road. When Sansa dismounted, she and Jon embraced wordlessly. Ghost ducked his head as Shadow yipped and darted between legs. Sansa smelled of pine smoke and sweet birch bark, of home. Jon felt a sudden hot sting behind his eyes. He blinked it away. When they parted, she turned to Daenerys, inclining respectfully. "Winterfell thanks the Queen of Flame for keeping the hearth." Daenerys smiled, genuine. "House Targaryen thanks the Queen of Winter for trusting the fire." Together they walked into the city, direwolf pups bounding, small folk cheering. At the base of the throne hall, Sansa paused, tilting her head back. The living throne's canopy now brushed the open skylight, blossoms drifting down in lazy spirals like pale moths. She stepped beneath, raising a hand. One blossom settled into her palm, crimson-tipped petals cool against skin. Jon watched her expression soften with something like awe. "This tree," she whispered, "sounds like wind across still lakes." She closed her fist over the blossom. "It feels right." Bran wheeled forward, face alight. "It thrums louder since you crossed the neck. Perhaps roots recognize their sister leaves." "Ben?" Sansa crouched, kissed Bran's cheek. "You have grown tall even sitting still." Bran's eyes flickered pale green. "I grow everywhere now." The moot reconvened with Sansa occupying the north seat. Her first motion: a proposal that the council scribes craft a common tongue primer, blending Northern Valyrian and Old Tongue symbols, distributed free to every village school across realms. Let no child's letters bind them to old rivalries, she argued. Lords murmured, impressed. The motion passed unanimously. Evenings became symphonies of industry. Forges ringing, sawmills humming, children's choir rehearsing for the festival of new moons. The scales of judgment dissolved after Brienne's calmly fierce discourse in their candlelit cellar, with Arya ghosting behind her stroking needle. No casualties, though rumor claimed several zealots shaved their heads, vowing pilgrimage to remote hermitages, to pray away the wolf dreams. In Old Town, Davos diplomacy succeeded beyond hopes. The Septon Council signed compact, endorsing the living throne as blessed by the Seven's aspect of renewal. White fever cases dwindled once candles of red glass burned in every sick ward. The unnatural chill drawn forth and dispersed in sparks. East at the Eyrie, Jorah and Arya hosted open courts among mountain clans, exchanging goats, barley and dragonglass arrowheads for neutrality oaths. In an act that would spawn 10 songs, Arya leapt a chasm to rescue a clan boy who slipped on frost, cementing legend of the Spring Wolf. Yet not all threats slept. Deep within the ruins of Valyria, whispers stirred. Sailors along the summer sea spoke of lights flickering under molten waves, of ash clouds rising in spirals that never drifted on the wind. Quarthian spice traders returned white-haired overnight, raving about a chorus of cold beneath fire. One such trader staggered into Sunspear Harbor, half frozen despite desert heat, clutching shards identical to Yara's cursed armor. Arianne sent Raven to King's Landing. The storm you quelled gathers again over smoking seas. Council pressed Bran for guidance. He cast his sight east, but returned with brow furrowed. The old wound bleeds where dragons were born. Our root has deepened here. It cannot stretch that far without thinning. We must send hearts, people, rather than branches. Daenerys volunteered instantly. Her blood called to that place. Jon would not let her go alone. Sansa stood as regent of winter and flame in their absence, backed by Tyrion and the lords. Preparations began for a voyage that would dwarf all their past journeys. 2 dragons winging across skies once filled by doom, accompanied by a fleet of mixed sails. Greyjoy iron-proud frigates, Tyrell fast cogs laden with grain, Dorne's swift dromons bristling with scorpions, dragonglass fused with ever-hot iron touched by sapling petals. A ford? Maester Walken devised satchels of seed ash, powder ground from living throne blossom cores, meant to quell sorcery of freezing fire if cast upon flame. On the eve of departure, Jon walked the city one last time. He passed the rebuilt orphanage where Tyrek Lannister played tag with broomsword knights. He saluted unsullied patrols teaching newfound recruits a drill where shields locked into living wood motif. He crossed the Bridge of Mirrors at sunset, his reflection fractured into 10 shards of amber and crimson and azure sky. Each fragment showed him a different man: bastard, crow, king, kinslayer, peacemaker. Yet each wore the same quiet determination. He ended in the Godswood, where Bran's transplanted raven hopped along a low branch, head cocked. Sansa waited beside the fountain's restored pool, moon mirrored on its surface. Shadow the pup dozed in her lap. Jon sat on the worn stone ledge. For a span neither spoke. "You sail at dawn." "You said eventually." "Yes. You'll come back." "Not a question." "I will." He watched ripples across water. "And when I do, maybe we remain still for a while." She traced circles in the pup's fur. Winterfell's halls feel too small some nights. Yet eerie. She gestured to towering broken walls. "The new tree within?" "The air feels wide, but not empty." She met his eyes. "Where do you imagine raising children, Jon Snow?" The question startled, not in content, but timing. He considered. Ghost nudged his knee. "Between," he said slowly. "Winters here are harsh. Summers in the north are bright. Maybe they should know both. Wolves that learn to dance by dragonfire, and still scent snow's story." Sansa's lashes fluttered. "Then bring back a summer unfrozen. I'll keep the hearth hot." He reached, brushing knuckles gently across her cheek. No other vows were needed. Dawn bled peach pink across a clear sky as Drogon and Rhaegal rose from the parade ground. Cityfolk thronged ramparts, hands raised. Grey worms signaled half the Unsullied to hold the keep, the other half marching in lockstep onto Tyrell grain ships. Yara's fleet unfurled sails stitched with wolf dragon sigils. Daenerys atop Drogon wore scale mail of green and obsidian. Jon on Rhaegal wore black leather tooled with white leaves. Bran, remaining, guided ravens overhead. Sansa and Tyrion watched from the throne hall roof, breaths forming twin plumes. At Jon's hip calm glinted faintly. On his chest, tucked inside tunic, lay Sansa's newest letter. A pressed blossom, its petals now winter white, edges kissed red, veins turning green. The color of beginnings. Dragon's Bank southeast, wings catching thermals. The fleet below cut foamy furrows, banners snapping. Behind them, the living throne's blossoms cascaded like snowfall under clear spring sky. Each petal falling slow, whirling as if reluctant to part from bough. They drifted across rooftops, over market awnings, onto children's upturned palms where laughter spun them skyward again. And high above, halfway between sun and earth, 2 riders pointed their mounts toward the smoking horizon where history's oldest wound festered. Their silhouettes merged with morning light until nothing remained but wings. Great, beating, indomitable, bearing hope stitched from root and flame, wolf and dragon, forward into the vast unfinished song of the realm. Ah-ka. Foam sloughed from Rhaegal's talons as he skimmed the waves. The dragon's emerald wings stretched to their widest span, racing the wind, testing invisible currents on the long slant southeast, from Blackwater Bay. Jon crouched low in the saddle, hugging the ridged spine to reduce drag, hood whipping against his cheeks. Sea air cut briny and cold, but the season's first warmth lingered beneath the breeze, an intimation of true spring. 500 feet below, the Allied fleet churned eastward in double line, sails patched from half a dozen realms: Dornish red, Reach green, Ironborn black, Baratheon gold. A scattering of white canvas hurriedly dyed with the new wolf and dragon emblem. Spray glittered off prows. Deck crews gestured skyward each time the shadows of 2 dragons passed. whether in blessing or foreboding, Jon could not tell. Only that hope and fear were twined so tightly, these days they seemed a single thread. He glanced across the sun-streaked distance to Daenerys. She rode astride Drogon near cloud level, pale hair whipping like a banner against scales dark as nightfall. The great black's outline shimmered where heat rippled from its body. Even in full flight, Drogon exerted a furnace's glow, a portable hearth against whatever chill haunted the horizon ahead. They had set a 15-minute pulse. Drogon would surge ahead, scout half a league, then wheel back into formation, ensuring eyes on any storm or hostile vessel. So far, only pods of curious dolphins and the ragged triangle fin of a lone shadowcat shark kept pace. The wide summer sea felt calm, almost friendly. It was unnerving. Mid-afternoon on the third day, Jon coaxed Rhaegal down to the flagship, a broad-decked cog out of Old Town Recrescent, the faithful forge. As talons crushed onto the forward grating, sailors bowed in near instinctive awe. Though months had passed since dragons became guardians rather than scourge. Jon slung a rope ladder and descended, boots thudding onto oak planks humming with cargo vibration. Gendry emerged from the chart house, wiping grease from his palms, hair wind-blown and sun-bronzed. The axle on port windlass cracked. He said in lieu of greeting. Respectfully, your dragon's landing shook her bones. But we'll lash reinforcement. Jon offered a quick clasp of forearms. If the forge can't handle a bit of windfall, no ship can. He scanned the deck. Barrels of seed ash were strapped in iron cages. Bundles of spear-length dragonglass rods glittered tar-dark. Racks of scorpions lashed beneath tarps waited like folded locusts. Stowage still tight. Weight distributed by Maester Walken's ledgers. Gendry confirmed. We run no risk of capsizing, provided we don't take 2 full broadsides. He bared teeth. And what pirate would dare while Drogon circles? A desperate one. Jon's eyes drifted eastward to the thin gray haze bruising the horizon. The first real sign of their destination. How's morale? Gendry followed his gaze, expression tightening. Better than in the city when the frost ships came. Worse than on a harvest festival. They believe in the mission. Doesn't make it less terrifying. Jon nodded. We gather commanders in an hour. Bring your weight table. Arya will want details. Gendry grinned. Our spring wolf navigating supply ledgers. 7 hells I never thought. He turned, calling to a deckhand about replacement planking as Jon ascended the ladder. Higher, Rhaegal rumbled. Sensing tension, Jon stroked the warm scale behind the ear ridge, then vaulted into the saddle. A squeeze of knees and the dragon rejoined the updraft, spiraling back to rendezvous with Drogon. As they gained altitude, salt spray drifted away, replaced by a faint acrid tang. Smoke, but not the domestic hearth smoke of villages, or even the battlefield char of winter campaigns. This was deeper, older, sulfur, and brimstone stirred by volcanic belching far beyond sight. Valyria's breath. By dusk, they parked the dragons on the mid-fleet shipyard barge to conserve strength. Lanterns strung between masts flickered gold. The sea mirrored each flame until it seemed a second sky of quivering constellations. On the quarterdeck, Jon, Daenerys, Arya, Grey Worm, Gendry, Captain Miriel Redwine, and Yara Greyjoy crouched around a chalk-marked plank table, pinned by half-eaten salt cod. Maester Walken hovered with a ledger, his quill scratching like a restless cricket. Arya tapped the map. The smoking strait splits here, 6 leagues wide at the narrowest. We steer south of the heat vents, hugging volcanic shallows, so our keels aren't sucked into deep magma churn. She glanced up. Valyrian legends claim the sea can boil there. We'll know soon. Captain Redwine, hair braided with kelp charms, shrugged. My father ran wine ships, crossed these waters decades back. He spoke of steam clouds hissing like dragons, but never a hull blistered. It may have worsened, Walken murmured. Geological stress after the doom continues. Daenerys ran a finger along the dotted hazard lines. Dragons will scout first. If the strait proves impassable, we break. Half the fleet skirts south past the Basilisk Isles. That adds a fortnight. Arya's mouth twitched downward. More time for our shadow enemy to consolidate. Jon folded arms, cloak fluttering in night breeze. Best course is still the strait. We maintain altitude low enough to gauge sea temperature. Rhaegal can dip tail. He'll sense heat shifts faster than instruments. Dragons as thermometers, Yara snorted. Whatever works. Grey worms, steady gaze, swept faces. Unsullied stand ready to disembark with scorpions on any outcrop if needed. We defend ships while fleet skirts hazard. Plans set. They broke for fitful rest. Jon found a pallet just below forecastle. Ghost curled at his side. Dreams spilled tangled images. Crimson-tipped blossoms swirling through ash clouds. A sapphire wolf helm dissolving in steaming surf. Sansa's laughter echoing through black halls, where flowers bloomed from cracks. He woke before dawn to throaty dragon calls. Above deck, the world glowed eerie orange, sunrise diffused by drifting ash. All across the horizon, small black motes floated like dead snowflakes. The haze thickened each minute, and with it, the stench of brimstone. Drogon launched with predatory leap. Rhaegal followed. Jon strapped in, nostrils burning. They climbed, but not far. The plume of ash rose higher still. Daenerys signaled downward. Maintain low. Outrun the cloud. The fleet below tightened formation. Sailors dousing sails with seawater to guard against ember rain. Mid-morning, the sea itself began to seethe. Patches bubbled, roiling as though monstrous creatures exhaled from the deep. Fumaroles burst, spitting jets of scalding steam. The faithful forge's lookout cried warning. Redwine veered the helm, avoiding a boil patch that would have seared the planking. Two ships astern reacted a breath late. One lost half its forward oars to a hiss of white vapor, men shrieking as blisters rose on unprotected calves. Dragons swooped to cover. Jon flung a rope ladder, hauled 3 scalded sailors into Rhaegal's claws, delivered them to Gendry's deck where healers slathered salt-rimmed aloe beneath hasty linen. Daenerys circled above a particularly violent vent, studying. Suddenly she banked sharply. Drogon's tail lashed water, raising steam. Jon followed her gaze. An island. No, a fortress of jagged obsidian thrusting from the water, slick with tarry sheen. Its angles defied natural order, like petrified claws reaching skyward. A single archway yawned at waterline, large enough to admit a galley. Arya. Spyglass pressed to eye on the forge's bow. Signaled. Redwine hesitated. Yara urged hard starboard. Eventually consensus. The fleet would moor in the volcanic isle's lee, outside scalding currents. With deft sail work, the ships bled velocity, gliding into the calmer shadow. Once ropes secured, Jon, Daenerys, Arya, and a spear detachment rowed toward the archway in a longboat, torchlight flickering off the water as they passed under the overhang. Inside, a vast cavern opened, an ancient Valyrian drydock perhaps, its interior lined with basalt pillars carved in serpentine relief. Poison-green lichen glowed faintly, casting subterranean aurora across black walls. The water stilled, unnaturally warm. Their oars dripped molten-tinged droplets. At the far end, a narrow shelf of stone bore remnants of machinery. Cogs fused by heat, shattered bronze cradles that once may have supported dragon eggs or molten ore. In the center stood a monolith, a column of translucent quartz veined in smoky tendrils. Embedded within, a silhouette writhed. Humanoid yet boneless, limbs elongated, head crowned with jagged shards. Its eyes, closed, leaked tiny trickles of blue-white frost that steamed upon contact with warm air. Arya's dagger was out instantly. What in the 9 hells? Daenerys lifted her torch, flames reflecting in the crystal. Stasis prison, she whispered, recognition dawning from half-forgotten scrolls. The Valyrians experimented on their conquered sorcerers. They used cryo-amber to suspend shapeshifters of the cold. Jon's pulse thudded. One of the frost priests, Bran sensed. As if hearing, the figure's eyelids snapped open. Pure void, deeper than night. Frost spiderwebbed through the quartz. Cracks crackled outward, scattering ice dust. Arya leapt back, unsullied raised scorpion-tipped spears. Jon shouted, "Hold," and drew calm. Daenerys uttered a Valyrian phrase. The words pulsed like molten glass. Drogon shrieked outside. Rhaegal answered. Twin jets of fire erupted through the cavern mouth, brightening the gloom. Flames struck the quartz but did not melt it. Instead, heat met cold, forging clouds of steam so thick all sight vanished. Jon felt his lungs scald, reached for Daenerys' hand in blinding whiteness. Found it. Somewhere steel rang. A hiss, like breaking ice, rattled earbones. The mist thinned. The monolith lay shattered, puddled in shards. The shape was gone. Arya pointed upward. On a ledge 30 feet high the creature clung, frosted claws digging basalt. It unfurled, elongated again, mouth a fanged rift, exhaling vapor that rhymed the torch barrels. Then it dove, not at them but at the water, striking surface without splash, dissolving into a ribbon of azure light that raced through depths toward the cavern entrance. Jon swore, sprinted back to the boat. Arya hurled herself aboard. Unsullied followed disciplined. Rowers pulled furiously. Outside, the creature surfaced between anchored ships, drawing frost from sea into spires that lashed rigging. Sailors screamed. Giant icicles skewered hull planking. Timbers groaned. Rhaegal dove. But the entity sank again, reappearing near another ship, gliding like a reef shadow. Drogon blasted signature inferno that boiled water, yet frost recongealed seconds later. The being fed on heat, transmuting into strength. Jon and Daenerys exchanged grim understanding mid-air on dragon backs. Brute, flame, futile. They needed the tree's counterbalance, the seed ash. A cry rang. Gendry hauling a cask topside. Grey worms unsullied rolled others, fuses already lit. With timing drilled along voyage practice, they hurled clay bombs into the water where frost rippled. Upon impact, seed ash erupted in a cloud of shimmering motes, glow that resembled the living throne's petal veins. Where motes touched sea, frost hissed, retreated as if repelled by an invisible net. The creature's form sputtered mid-shift. Its cry, like a choir of shattering glass, sliced the air. It darted away, but bombs fell in salvo after salvo, blanketing water. Jon swooped Rhaegal lower. From his saddle, he hurled a satchel straight into the creature's path. It detonated, splattering silver-green luminescence across its chest. Light burrowed under icy flesh. Veins of jade licked along limbs. The entity convulsed, each jerk smaller, until it froze mid-air, petrified statue half rising from sea. The gemlines pulsed once, twice, then burst outward. Shards rained like snow. What remained melted into harmless brine. A hush settled. Steam curled above the ripples. Dragons hovered, watchful. Sailors groaned relief. Arya exhaled, wiping beads of ice from brow. Daenerys steadied Drogon's glide. Gendry yelled, "Seed ash ration half spent," but triumph twinkled in his grin. Grey worms saluted. Jon guided Rhaegal onto Forge's deck again. He scanned the horizon. Haze had thinned, exposing Valyria's broken mainland still many leagues distant, a sawtooth silhouette beneath roiling ash clouds. If one frost priest had been imprisoned at an outpost dock, how many lingered where the doom itself cracked the world? Daenerys slid from Drogon, landing beside. Her eyes mirrored firelight and resolve. "We burn the vents from above as we cross. Seal fissures with molten rock, limit their escape." Jon sheathed calm. "But we must find the source conjuring them. Some heart of shadow still beats there." That night they lit no deck flames, save masked lanterns. The fleet rocked quietly in Obsidian Cove. Jon sat at the bow rail. Parchment unfolded beneath starlight. Sansa's blossom letter, now faintly luminescent from stray seed ash. Petals glowed. Perhaps sap tried to answer the newborn threat. He traced a fingertip over veins, whispering a vow. "I will return." Dawn arrived blood red behind smoke. Sails unfurled. Dragons launched. The fleet navigated the strait's throat, time to rise on rare calm tide. Steam vents glowered, but did not burst. Scarred by prior night's assault, ash fell like silent black rain, stippling canvases. Sailors smeared coal lines beneath eyes to cut glare. By noon, shattered towers loomed. Valyria, mile-high buttresses split and slumped, still smoldering centuries on. Rivers of lava cascaded in lazy braids down ravines, some cooled to obsidian flows that gleamed like oil. The roar of subterranean flame rumbled beneath keelboards. On the lead deck, Arya lifted spyglass. Movement north slope, she called. Jon took a look. Among twisted spires, dozens, maybe hundreds, of forms glimmered. Humanoid, but translucent, weaving like smoke strands. They clustered around a massive sinkhole where magma spurted. At its rim, a crystal dais jutted. A dais identical to the prison they shattered, but grander. Big enough for a dragon. Daenerys' face hardened. They're summoning something. Bran's distant raven croak echoed from shipmast. Its message clear. Root tremors sensed, danger immediate. No more stealth. Dragons veered. Fleet angled for broadside. Scorpions loaded with petal alloy bolts. Unsullied armed satchels. Gendry readied catapults, rigged to hurl barrels of oil mixed with seed ash. Flame and root united. The battle for Valyria began with a roar beyond mortal memory. Drogon and Rhaegal dove through ash clouds. Flame gouts carving fiery paths. Frost shades coalesced into javelins of ice, flung skyward. Some spears pierced scales. Dragons shrieked. Blood fell sizzling onto basalt. Jon felt each pain spark through bond but pressed on, guiding Rhaegal to unleash spiral of green-gold fire across Dais Ring. Frost priests evaporated in blossom-tinged conflagration. Yet from craters, Maw rose a new terror. A dragon? No. A worm of ice and obsidian fused. 3 heads extruding from a single serpentine trunk. Wings of crystalline shards that whistled like razors. Its roar quelled sound itself. The air temperature plummeted. Waves offshore froze mid-crest. Ships shuddered as rigging iced. Drogon collided first, flame bathing the triple maw. Ice melted, rehardened instantly. One head snapped, teeth clamping onto Drogon's foreleg, fracturing scale. Daenerys screamed unheard over din. Jon urged Rhaegal beneath, slashing claws at the creature's belly where obsidian struts met ice tissue. Cracks, spidered but held. A second head lunged, blue fire jetting. Rhaegal rolled away, tail smashing into basalt spire, sending shards cascading onto frost priests below. On the beach, gray worms ranks advanced. Catapults launched ash oil barrels that broke upon the wyrm's tail. Silver-green plumes erupted. Where moats clung, ice steamed, seams widened. Gendry's scorpions loosed volleys, bolts whistling, embedding in joints. Petal alloy flared, corroding frost with living light. Arya sprinted along ridge, throwing dragonglass daggers into priests, weaving reinforcement spells. Each strike unmade a glyph. Energy faltered. She leapt gap after gap, ghost quick. But the worm endured. It coiled, crushing basalt, wings beating hurricane gusts. One head speared at forge where Yara's archers held line. Bolt ropes snapped, men tumbled. Ice breath sheeted across deck, freezing sailors where they stood like macabre statues. Yara roared, hacking at Frost with Eric, shattering limbs, tears freezing on her cheeks. Jon's heart hammered. He guided Rhaegal in spiraling climb, ascending above ash plume. From this height, the battlefield shrank. A maelstrom of flame, frost, smoke. He drew calm. Blade mirrored volcanic glare, but its children-carved runes pulsed faintly, echoing living throne. Jon whispered a prayer to old gods and new, then urged Rhaegal into a stoop. They fell like a comet. At the last heartbeat, Jon leapt from saddle, sword raised two-handed. He slammed onto the worm's central neck, blade finding a crevice corroded by seed ash. Runes blazed emerald. The sword sank to hilt. Shockwave whipped out, shattering ice membrane. Worms screeched, thrashing. Jon clung. Snowblind. Rhaegal swooped, catching him seconds before he would be hurled. Below, Daenerys seized moment. Drogon exhaled white-hot dragonfire laced with seed, ash canisters, hurled simultaneously by Unsullied. Flame met root magic, swirling into luminous cone that engulfed all three heads. Cracks detonated. The worm burst apart, raining glittering fragments that dissolved mid-air into harmless snowmelt. Silence spread, broken only by a crackle of cooling lava. Surviving frost priests howled, forms destabilizing without anchor. They melted into slush, which seeped into black sand and steamed away. Jon guided Rhaegal to land beside Drogon. Daenerys slid from saddle, sprinted to him. They collided, arms around each other, relief raw. Nearby, Grey Worm planted the new sigil flag into obsidian soil. Sailors and Unsullied cheered hoarse. But victory's echo was met by grinding rumble. The caldera walls trembled. Without the frost force siphoning heat, Valyria's subterranean rivers of fire swelled unchecked. Basalt cracked. Magma surged. Fissures opened beneath priests' dais sight, belching flame 10 times height of a shipmast. Arya waved from ridge, time to go. Evacuation order barked. Crews sprinted for boats. Dragons grasped men in claws, ferrying to decks. Yara hacked free any ice-frozen comrades before flame reached, dropping them into dinghies. Jon and Daenerys soared, scanning for stragglers. A final run snatched Gendry loaded with charred plans from Forge ruins. When last sailor safe, dragons wheeled seaward. Behind them, Valyria erupted. The entire promontory exploded in fountain of molten rock, ash towering into stratosphere. A roar like world's heart breaking chased the fleet for leagues as they fled west, sails snapping, decks coated in falling cinder that cooled to harmless grit. From horizon, Valyria dwindled to orange glow, then darkness. That night, they anchored in deep calm water under star-studded canopy. Fires burned low on decks. Wounded wrapped in blankets drank mellow wine. Others wept in silence or sang ragged ballads. Jon sat against mast, Daenerys at his shoulder, sharing canteen. Ghost lay between them, eyes reflecting embers and constellations. Walken approached, face soot gray. Preliminary count. Dashi. 43 lost, 28 wounded. But the creature destroyed. Priests gone. He bowed and withdrew. Daenerys rested head on Jon's shoulder. We ended the echo before it could sing across seas. Jon brushed ash from her hair. Not alone. Root and flame forged stronger together. She smiled faint. When we return, the living throne will have grown again. He pictured blossoms drifting in throne hall. Sansa's promised to catch them. Yes. His voice thickened with exhaustion and relief. Home. Morning found the fleet turning northwest, using new currents carved by Valyria's demise. The sea steam dissipated. Sky cleared sapphire. Dolphins escorted bows, leaping in playful arcs. Dragons glided on warm thermals, occasionally diving to snatch giant tuna for breakfast. By the 7th day, Blackwater Bay's familiar contours loomed. Watchfires lit on bluffs, bells sounded. Children of the city spilled onto wharves, staring skyward as battered sails and weary dragons returned. From the throne hall, roof Sansa stood flanked by Bran and Tyrion. The living tree's canopy now dominated half the roofline, its trunk dividing into 3 major boughs. North, south, east, each heavy with blossoms and nascent fruit, shaped like tiny star teardrops. Jon dismounted in courtyard roar. Sansa descended steps, skirts swirling, lips trembling between pride and anxiety. He strode forward, embraced her. Blossom petals dislodged by breeze swirled around them. Nearby, Daenerys raised her arms to Drogon's muzzle. The dragon bowed, exhaling gentle puff that sent petals dancing higher. Tyrion approached, voice choked. The realm breathes easier. Bran's distant gaze found Jon. Valyria's wound closed for a time. But you stitch new cloth across an old tear. The world will hold. Jon inclined head. Then we build larger looms. The council convened that evening beneath the glowing canopy. Jon recounted events. Daenerys produced shards of obsidian ice fused by seed ash, now inert. Arya laid frost priest tokens upon the council table as proof of purge. Lords gasped. Common seat delegate Hob Grass uttered fervent prayer of thanks. When speeches ended, Sansa rose, blossom in hand. We owe debt to those who traveled beyond horizon. She looked to Jon, to Daenerys. But now we owe them peace. Let rot of old wars be compost for new gardens. Let every stronghold plant offspring of this tree. She turned to Bran. Will it allow? Bran nodded, smile gentle. I saved seed pods before boughs climbed roof. The roots trust the world now. So pods were distributed, a corn-like husks glowing faintly. One to Gendry for Storm's End courtyard. One to Arianne for Sunspear's oasis. One to Yara to plant atop basalt cliff facing smoking sea. One each for Vale, Reach, Riverlands, and Dorne's outposts. Even Tyrek Lannister accepted one on behalf of Westerland's orphans. Weeks passed. Walls rose anew around King's Landing. Mirror bridges became bustling boulevards. The Frost Quarter, once charred, blossomed into the Petal Ward where traders sold glassware etched with intertwining wolves and dragons. Street urchins raced beneath tents, strung with blossom chains. They wore carved wooden pendants shaped as half-leaf, half-flame. The scales of judgment reopened their cellar, now a soup kitchen singing hymns of rebirth. Sansa oversaw city accounts, catching corrupt stewards with quiet firmness. Jon sparred Dawn Guard recruits in the yard, always ending sessions with lectures on mercy. Daenerys taught orphan girls how to fly kites resembling dragons. Each tether string dyed with ink ground from thrown fruit seeds. One crisp morning, high above the city, a dragon egg hatched. Not in a stone furnace nor over volcanic vent, but in a nest Drogon fashioned atop a rebuilt tower. The hatchling emerged green-black, eyes gold flecked with red. Jon and Daenerys witnessed together. The babe sneezed tiny flame, which curled into living throne petals drifting skyward, igniting them into sparks that winked like newborn stars. That night Jon took quill, parchment, and wrote north. The realm grows not by conquering, but by rooting. Come see. He sealed it with twin sigils, tied to Ghost's collar. As Direwolf bounded into darkness, moonlight buttered the city walls, and the two stewards of Flame and Winter stood hand in hand beneath their impossible canopy, listening to a new, quieter song carried on warm wind. A harmony of leaf rustle, dragon purr, and distant laughter. A song of beginnings, not endings, and of a home neither wholly north nor wholly south, but blossoming courageously in the space between.